accordance with the Sunshine Law, notice of the meeting's been advertised in the retrospect with notice to the Courier Post and both townships' municipal clerks. Notice has been posted at both school districts' meeting places, Zane North Elementary School and Oaklyn Public School. And with that, I'm going to call to order, and I'm going to do the roll calls with the Collingswood School Board first. Okay. Mr. Connor? No. Mr. Craig? Mr. Craig? I know I saw him.
No, sorry. At first, it wasn't letting me unmute myself.
Okay, I got you. All right.
I am here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Caden?
Here.
Ms. Mello?
Here.
Ms. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Rivera? Ms. Sabarino?
Here.
Ms. Celia?
Here.
Mr. Stotts?
Here.
Ms. Wood? Ms. Henry? I know I saw Fiona.
Here.
Thank you. Now the Oaklyn Board. Mrs. Butchko?
Here.
Mrs. Falpel?
Here.
Mr. Fink?
Here.
Mrs. Marmion?
Here.
Mrs. Riley?
Here.
Mr. Schaefer?
Here.
Mr. Tavy?
Here.
Mrs. Castle?
Here.
Mr. Stotts?
Here.
Thank you. I guess you can all, if you can, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, as this is a joint school board meeting of both school districts, I'm going to ask for the first public comment. The purpose of this first public comment section is to discuss items listed on the agenda. Additional, more general comments may be made later in the evening. The public is reminded that attempts to resolve all concerns and complaints should go through the appropriate administrative staff members. At this time, are there any public comments for the beginning of the board meeting? Anything coming in, Scott?
Nothing in the chat.
Nothing, okay. All right, I'm going to close public comment. We have a couple action items to go to before we go to the main event.
Someone put their name in that they would like to say something. James McMillan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, can you guys hear
Hi.
me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I brought to the attention of a couple people about students meeting their teachers if we decided to remote teach our children, like if they can actually meet face to face with the teachers. And that was at the last meeting. I think I was told no, and I'll stress my concern about that because it builds a relationship between the teacher and the student and protects the teacher's job. So I would so I'm going to do 100% remote learning until I feel comfortable. And at the same time, I would like for my students to meet their teacher in person for just a 5 or 10 minute kind of parent teacher conference thing, right at the beginning of school.
Okay.
And I mean, at the end of the day, I would also like to see that continued on a monthly basis, something outside, social distance. So there could be a physical relationship with the teacher.
Okay, thank you. when we get into the main event with the presentation of the rollout for the opening of schools, there's going to be a time at the end where we can discuss and ask more additional questions related to that presentation. Are there any other comments or questions before I do the few items that need to be voted on for the school districts? All right, I got an agreement with James.
Someone said they have a question about the calendar. Jen Rossi, I also have a question about the calendar.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Greg F. has a question.
Okay, Greg?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm the parent of 2 children at Mark Newby. I'd like to see them in school as much as possible. If enough parents opt to have their children go full remote, will there be a chance my kids can go to school 4 days a week instead of 2? And have you looked into moving kids around to other elementary schools that might have bigger capacity?
Okay.
I would suggest at this point that we wait until we get through the presentation, because a lot of these questions are going to be answered.
Okay.
And I think we're going to ask questions that in the next hour are going to be answered.
There are a couple questions on there about, we've hit our 100-person max, and is it being shared elsewhere?
Not being shared anywhere else, but I am recording it.
Okay. With that, I'm going to go to section 3 of the Collingswood agenda, and then I'm going to run over to Oaklyn. Dr. Oswald, you have 2 items. You want me to run through them?
Yes, please.
For your behalf. All right. The first item 3.01, we're approving the high school coaches stipends for fall and winter as presented, and in 3.02, the revised school calendar. You have a motion and a second to approve those items this evening, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second,
I'm sorry, can you shout your name?
Matthew Craig.
Got you, thanks. I'm going to take a roll call. Mr. Connor? Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Caden?
Yes.
Ms. Mello?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Rivera? Ms. Severino?
Yes.
Ms. Celia?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes.
Ms. Wood? Ms. Henry?
Yes.
Okay, now for the Oaklyn board. I apologize. One item 4.01 on your agenda, and it's the approving the revised school calendar for Oaklyn for the 2021 school year. You have a motion to approve that, please.
Jen Castle moves.
A second?
Chris Riley.
Okay, I will roll call that. Mrs. Butchko?
Yes.
Mrs. Falpel?
Yes.
Mr. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Marmion?
Yes.
Mrs. Riley?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Tavy?
Yes.
Mrs. Castle?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes.
And as we're moving into the committee of the whole section, for both school districts, I'm requesting a motion from either to go into a committee of the whole, please.
So moved. Second.
Second, was that Rich?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Oswald.
Okay. So I'm going to
You're on.
share. Thank you. I'm going to share the presentation right now. And if I can get to the button, we are going to in present mode. All right. So, so here's what I'd like to do for some of the ground rules for this. I can address the school calendar. When we redid the school calendar, I took out all the half days, half day Wednesdays. The assumption is that whatever schedule we go with, we're going to go with throughout the school year. I can tell you 3 things in tonight's presentations, probably 3 things tonight have already changed. So as I get to them, I will tell you what they are because there are some things that are changing. And I can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone in March or April. So I can tell that what I will say is once we get this up and running and we see how it's going, if we can do some PD on half day Wednesdays, something like that, then that is something that is that we'll do. The other piece is that part of our Wednesday is going to be set aside for PD on a normal basis, probably part of every Wednesday. So the question that came in about the calendar, you're not necessarily going to see that on the school calendar that we have built in already. What I can tell you is if we should come up with a vaccine in November and we're all back by December, we will revisit the calendar issue, and if everybody's back in school, we'll look at some of those half days to consider to continue with some of the equity and social emotional learning pieces that we've been tackling. So let me go through this. I'm going to go through what I would ask right now is that as I go through the presentation, if there are members of the either board who have questions, please ask those questions as we go through. I cannot see the chat. I'm not looking at the chat. I'm looking at the presentation. So if there are members of the Collingswood or Oaklyn boards who have questions, ask them as we go through the presentation. And the answer may be, I don't know, we don't know. And the answer may be, it's coming up. The other thing is at the end, we can certainly take questions from members who are joining us who aren't on the boards, or residents who are joining us who aren't on the boards. We can certainly take those questions. But if it's not covered in this presentation, there's a really good chance the answer is we don't know. And then finally, there was a finally in here somewhere. I'll think of the finally as we get going. The first several slides I'm going to go over pretty quickly because it's going to be a look back. A look back at some of the things, some of the premises that we keep, and then some of the things that we are that we've already completed. So our guiding principles throughout this entire process, number 1 has been don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There is no perfect plan. Anyone who asks, anyone who speaks to me, first thing I tell them is no perfect plan, and there is not going to be a plan that pleases everybody. We know that. When we developed this plan, we did our best not to lead from a place of constraints. We didn't start sentences with I can or we can or we've never done that. We tried to look at a way to make this process as forward thinking as possible, with the hope that at the end of this, when we all come out on the other end, we will be a better and a stronger school district. And then that leads me to my final statement here, which is really one that I'm very close to, and that is everybody's in a rush to get back to normal. In that rush to get back to normal, let's not forget that there are parts of normal that aren't worth rushing back to. And that we need to take advantage of this very unfortunate situation to come out stronger and better and more equitable on the other end. Okay, there we go. Again, mission statement of both school districts. I'll let you read that. And our core purpose in both school districts, which we will hang on to very tightly during this whole process, is to ensure that every student grows. Our process thus far, across both districts, we established 4 work groups. Our 4 work groups that were established back at the end of May, beginning of June, and started to work way back then, probably almost 2 months ago, are school health and safety, instruction and mental health, operations and fiscal management, and our steering committee. The steering committee is the committee that I lead up, and that committee is really focused on the coherence between the other 3 groups, making sure that if one group is recommending we go left, another isn't saying we should go right. Equity, which has to be at the forefront of all of our minds, and also communications. The members of those groups are administrators, some supervisors, teachers, nurses, association representatives, community members play a role in all of those groups. Our school health and safety group looked at school facilities, our general health protocols, which would apply to everybody, and then some staff health protocols and some student health protocols. Our instruction and mental health group is taking a look at schedules and learning time. We'll get into that tonight. Remote learning best practices. That was a group that I worked with. Instruction at the lower elementary, preschool and lower elementary. Our instruction at the mid to upper elementary. Our instruction in the middle school and high school. And then also some of our co-curricular programs. We've spent a lot of time on mental health, social emotional learning and mental health, and also special services. In this capacity, in this bullet down here, special services we are defining as the actual child study team, case management, related services, those types of things. So the teaching piece is included up here. As part of that group, the instruction group, I led a group back at the end of June as we were just coming off of remote learning that took a look at what classroom routines work best within each grade span, what classroom management procedures work best within each grade span, and what tools work best within each grade span. We are now compiling, we're working with all that, all the information that we collected at the grade levels, and we are doing our best to identify tools that we can use, if not district-wide, then certainly within a grade span, so that we have some form of consistency across schools and across the district. Operations and fiscal management group looked at the budget, our human resources, technology, food service, and transportation. So a lot of operations issues in there. And then our steering committee, as I just talked about, looked at making sure there's alignment between the plans, communications, equity, and then governance. Governance would be things like what types of policies do we need to change. So a crosswalk, the school health and safety group really aligns closely to the Department of Education's document. The Department of Ed's document is called The Road Back. Our document is called Welcome Back. So we have realigned our work. We think that our committees have done some good work, and we think they make a lot of sense based upon the people who are in each group, their levels of expertise, who they supervise, those types of things. But we are realigning those as we develop our plan to line up with the 4 areas identified by the Department of Education. And in tonight's presentation, you're going to see these 4 titles throughout the presentation. So what we know today, the governor has asked schools to develop a reopening plan that includes in-person instruction and a full remote option. If you saw the governor's news conference today, he reiterated, reemphasized the importance of in-person instruction. We know from our surveys that some of our families want in-person instruction 5 full days a week. Others want to not send their children back at all. We know that there's no plan that's going to meet everybody's needs, but we're going to do our best to meet as many needs as we can. And we also know that guidance from the medical community on an almost daily basis is being updated and is changing as they learn additional information. Continuing that, we know that the health and safety of our students and staff must be our top priority. We must stay abreast of the latest science while annoying a lot of the background noise and the political winds that are unfortunately impacting this discussion. We must provide our families and staff members with choice. We have to be ready to quickly move to 100% remote instruction on almost a moment's notice. And we have to acknowledge above all else that September 2020 is not going to look a thing like September 2019. One of my biggest fears as we talk about returning to school is that our families, our parents, and our kids have in their minds that they're going to return to school in September and it's going to look like what it looked like when they left in March or when they entered last September. That is not going to be the case. So there's 3 primary options when it comes to preparing for the new school year. Face-to-face would be students returning full-time with safety and social distancing protocols in place. The double asterisk, as you can see down here, means with that option, we have to be ready to go 100% remote. The remote got pushed off the slide there. The remote option, obviously students stay home and we do much like we did since March. And then the hybrid option, which is what we're going to talk about this evening, which is students coming in for partial days and then staying remote for partial days. And probably the biggest acknowledgement at all worthy of being put into red is that COVID-19 policies and decisions are intended to mitigate and not eliminate risk. We are not going to eliminate all possibilities of risk. So it is very important as families make their decisions that they understand that. There will be things in our schools that go wrong. There will be students who take off masks. Those things are going to happen. We're going to do our best to mitigate risk to our students, but we will not eliminate it. I am not going to go through all these dates. I'll put this presentation on the website, and we can certainly you can certainly take a look if dates interest you. But this is where we've been since March 9th is when we started planning for our potential to go remote before we even know that was really likely going to happen. All the way through last week when we did our in-person graduation ceremony about a month late on the high school football field, and every piece of the puzzle just about that happened in the middle. So there's been a lot of decision points. There's been a lot of changes along the way, and I suspect between this evening, July 27th and August 27th, there will probably be this many changes coming at us as we continue our march towards September. So now, again, these things happened in the past, but they were our attempt at looking ahead. We did a staff survey before the staff left in June. Had about 310 responses to that survey. And again, that assessed the confidence and fears surrounding the return to school, reflections on remote learning, what worked and what didn't, where their areas of concerns were, desired safety measures, scheduling preferences, and the challenges that our staff members could see associated with the return. We looked at all that data and used that to develop our plan. And then we did a parent survey back in the week of June 25th. We had about 1,300 responses, which is pretty good considering that it was one response per family. So that probably accounted for an overwhelming majority of our students across both districts. And again, assessing many of the same things: confidence, what you're concerned about, what types of scheduling work best, and also a few questions about remote learning, what worked and what didn't. And then we put out a real quick question on July 2nd, and that was a question about remote day preferences. And that is a question, the question was basically, if we had one day that was fully remote across the district where just about all students are home remote, what day would our families prefer? Before we begin the conditions for learning part, anybody on the board have questions about anything that we've talked about so far? Okay. All right, our conditions for learning. This is the longest section in the state document. I like to say this is the section that covers everything from mental health to Lysol wipes. So everything that involves us getting our kids ready, our buildings ready to come back to be as healthy as possible and as safe as possible in their learning environments is covered in this section. So the conditions for learning section of the state document includes 10 areas that they tell us we must consider. So this is how we are addressing those areas. We received guidance as soon as today from the Camden County Health Department. I can tell you we received guidance yesterday, and that guidance changed as of this morning. So I suspect that will change more as we get closer to the September opening date. But that guidance came from the County Health Department about requirements, isolating sick students, notification of parents, those things. I'm going to get into all of that as we move further in the presentation. One outstanding, this was outstanding as of yesterday, but I'm going to be able to answer this question a little bit later in the presentation in terms of how in depth are we going to go with notifications. That'll be coming up. Working with our physician to develop high risk criteria. So the CDC has released some high risk criteria, and we will certainly use those, but we will also go to our doctor, our school doctor, our school physician, for individual cases when individual cases are brought to our attention. We're working with our associations. There are association members on all of our committees in terms of the accommodations that we can provide to staff, and then working on signage for all of our schools in terms of social distancing, hand washing, and the importance of face covering. So if you think way back to March and some of the guidance that we were stressing to our families and to our students, we were really stressing social distancing, hand washing your hands a lot, or sanitizing your hands a lot. At that time, we were talking about the importance of coughing or sneezing into your sleeve, Now we've upgraded that a little bit to face coverings, but essentially throughout the last however many months, 5-6 months, the guidance, the overriding guidance hasn't really changed. So we are working on signage. We have some signage to be posted around our buildings to remind our students of those criteria. So that's the first of the 10 elements. The second is classrooms, testing rooms, and therapy rooms. This is basically any space in the school where students will be. That is not necessarily an office. So given the CDC guidelines, students must maintain social distancing. CDC describes that as 6 foot. The American Pediatric Association describes that as 3 feet. So we are looking at social distancing of 6 feet. Because of those social distancing requirements and the size of our schools and classrooms, we are not able to bring all the students back at once. So what we have done, in addition to the 6 foot establishing classrooms and setting up classrooms to maximize social distancing, we have also purchased a physical barrier system for our classrooms. Those barriers will be clear, and they will essentially be around 3 sides of each student. So the barriers will go on the desk, the students will sit behind them, and they will be used in our classrooms, and they will be used also in our therapy rooms, OTPT, speech counseling, those types of rooms. Our large all-purpose rooms will be used in spaces where distance is not possible. So if we have a classroom that's too small to maintain this, then we will have to shift the class to another larger space. So we will be using some of our larger spaces for that. And sharing of supplies will be eliminated unless sanitation is possible between uses. So principals currently are developing a list. This is a question that's come up several times. Our principals are developing a common school supply list. And we will be sending that out as soon as possible. I'm hoping to get that out very quickly. But the school supply lists will go out to all of our students. They'll be common across grade levels. And when students are in school, we're going to limit sharing of supplies. If there is some specialty item, think about science, a science lab in the high school, then we will sanitize in between those uses. Again, continuing with classrooms, testing, and therapy rooms. Our students and staff members will wear face coverings at all times. This is something that has come up several times. The State Department of Education guidance. I'm going to switch over here because somebody is not muted. Okay. Sorry. All right, let's see. Let me try this again. We have, there we go. When I am sharing, my keyboard will not work. There we go. Okay. There we go. So our students and staff will wear face coverings when they're in the building. Unless doing so inhibits their health, and verification of that, a doctor's note will be required. Teachers will be encouraged to educate students on the importance of face coverings and appeal to their sense of right, wrong, and to their sense of community and doing good for the community. Families will be asked to supply comfortably fitting face masks, and use of those masks will be encouraged for our students throughout the school day. We do await further guidance. This seems to be a question that we're really having a difficult time getting an answer to. I know from the pure medical hospital side, if we are working in a hospital, we would be told that the face shield alone is not enough, that a face shield is meant to be worn with a mask. From a school side, this is a question that we're struggling to get an answer to. I think everybody agrees they would prefer to have a mask and a face shield for just an extra layer of protection. But for our students or our staff members who are unable to wear a mask, we need some guidance and some direction on face shields alone, and we need that from, if not from the county health department, then we'll have to get that from our school physician. In the event that our students will not wear a mask, the teacher, administrator, or nurse will attempt to redirect the student and encourage their compliance. Ultimately, if we are unsuccessful at that, we're going to have to transition the student to remote learning. We cannot have other students and other adults have their health put at risk. We're going to work our hardest on that. We're not going to give up on kids very easily, but at some point, we may have to make that decision and work with the family on that. I think we have one more slide about classrooms, testing rooms, and therapy rooms. So our ventilation systems in our buildings will be checked and our filters changed monthly. We are looking at different types of filters for our ventilation system right now. Filters that may be able to, I guess, help filter out smaller particles. That's something that we're investigating right now. When possible, we will certainly open windows and get the fresh air in there. Our ventilation system, as it's designed, does bring fresh air into the building. But whenever possible, we will open our windows. I don't know on a day like today, which will happen in September, that opening the windows is going to do a lot of good in terms of getting fresh air into the building. Hand sanitizer machines installed in all of our elementary school classrooms at the entrances to our buildings, and I also say at the entrances to our buildings coming off the playgrounds. Hand sanitizer stations in the high traffic areas of the middle school and high school, and hand sanitizer pumps in the middle school and high school classrooms. And I apologize, a couple typos in there. Middle school and high school classrooms will have hand sanitizer pumps in each room. Hand washing stations in our early childhood classrooms, so typically those classrooms with bathrooms, as well as our preschool classrooms. And hand washing breaks will be built into our classrooms, classroom routines for classrooms without sinks, standalone sinks or stations in the rooms. Small group, which means close group learning, will not be permitted. We've removed the carpets from the classroom to eliminate any temptation to take the kids to the carpet. And our child study team and nurses will work together to review the needs of our medically fragile students on a case-by-case basis and make sure to the greatest extent possible that we can meet their needs. I think it is important to know, and I probably will say this again when we get to the instruction piece, the instruction area. I think it's important to understand that the type of instruction that maybe some of us in the adult world are used to is not the type of instruction that goes on in our classrooms today, particularly at the elementary classrooms, in our elementary classrooms. So we have worked really hard over the last 8 or 10 years to get rid of rows of desks and develop more social environments in our classroom where kids learn from and work with each other. That does not lend itself to these types of restrictions. So we are doing the best we can with the equipment and furniture and everything that we have in our schools. But a lot of what we've worked hard on, certainly our teachers have worked hard on over the last decade probably, in this case is just going to go out the window. So those things like small groups working, those are things that happen in elementary classrooms pretty much 90% of the day. So when I say that our education is not going to look the same, it is not going to look the same as when the kids left. We have one more slide of classroom testing and therapy rooms. Students will be strongly discouraged from bringing in unnecessary items from home. Got a new toy, show and tell, those types of things. For necessary items, each child will be assigned a bin for storage. So obviously this runs into the chilly weather. Kids are going to come in with coats. They may come in with boots. They may bring things from home that are necessary for learning. So every student will be assigned a bin. So things like coat rooms and cubbies and all that kind of stuff will be off limits. The idea is really to make the space as sanitary as possible. Our large spaces will be used only when social distancing in classrooms cannot be maintained. I mentioned that a slide or two ago. No scheduled large group gatherings will be permitted. So at the elementary level, we often have character ed assemblies, copying good assemblies, honor roll assembly, those types of things. None of that will be happening at least at the start of the school year. Our elementary principals are going to work hard to ensure that our students remain in cohorts throughout the day. So if I am in a classroom of, say, 11, 12 students in 3rd grade in one school, that 3rd grade group remains together throughout the day, that we're not doing things like reading buddies unless we do that remotely, but we're not doing things like reading buddies where the 5th graders go down and read to the 1st graders, that type of thing. Middle school and high school students will need to change classes while respecting social distancing, so that will be reinforced to our older students. Hand sanitizer will be used as the students enter the classrooms, and cleaning products will be available in every classroom. Question that comes up all the time is about custodians getting in and cleaning each classroom in between use. That's just not realistic.
we don't have enough custodians in the district to make that happen. So we will have the cleaning products available in our classrooms, and our students and staff members can certainly use them. We'll have access to them. But we will not have custodians getting into every classroom for the 4 or 5 minutes, in the 4 or 5 minutes between class changes at the middle school and high school level. We will work with our students. I don't like the word training, but work with our students on social distancing, masking, barriers, and cleaning. So we're going to provide work with our students on those areas during the first several days of school, and we will obviously do that with our staff prior to the students ever coming back. So that is one of the reasons that we extended those PD days at the start of the school year.
Scott, can I cut in for a sec?
Sure.
Quick question for you about could you clarify you said for the school supply list, be keeping them in bins at the elementary level, right? What does that look like for the middle school and high school then?
Middle school and high school, the kids will come with backpacks. I don't know if it's in the presentation. It may be, but we will not have access to lockers. So we're not going to use lockers in the hallway or in the locker rooms. So those students will have their items in backpacks and will carry them. So we're really going to work at looking at the curriculum and the requirements for our curriculum and minimizing, the 40 pounds of textbooks. We know our kids cannot, they're not going to walk around all day long with a boatload of textbooks with them. So that's an area that we are going to address. We haven't figured all that out yet, but we will address that. And, we will have some students who are, if students need to take books home, it may be that they just take them home and they leave them at home. So they don't have to lug them back and forth all the time because they will not have access to lockers.
Thank you.
I have a question. Face masks. Are parents going to be given, I understand face shields, there's a question about that, but for example, I work at the University of Pennsylvania, and I believe that no one can have face masks that have a vent of any kind attached to them. Are parents going to be given guidance as to what's an acceptable face mask?
We have not been given any guidance on what is and is not. Obviously, a face mask, we've seen some. I don't know that they're jokes or not jokes, but we've seen some face masks that have that are like knitted or crocheted or something like that. That's obviously not acceptable. But in terms of the masks that you see, I know some folks wear out in the community that have the little vent on the side. I don't have any guidance that says they're not okay. We have been told that students and staff will wear cloth face masks. So obviously it will not be N95s and for our students and our staff, our general staff members. So that's the guidance that we have.
Hey, Scott.
Yep.
Oh, before we move any further, can you speak to the ventilation systems in the schools, recirculated air versus fresh air?
Yeah, so we do have our systems in all of our schools are designed to bring fresh air in. They are all computer operated systems so that we can actually control the amount of fresh air that comes in. One of the challenges, I think in a perfect world, we would like to turn our air on and open the windows. If we do that, our system will freeze up. Our system will fail miserably. So that is really not an option. Our system is designed to be used with the windows closed. So we're going to assess that on a day-by-day basis to see if it's possible. I think the preferred situation would be that our windows are open. But if it's if we get a day like today, like the last couple of days, particularly in a day like today, the last couple of days isn't going to be real in any condition, any circumstance. But particularly in our buildings that have more than one floor, you're not going to be able to live on the top floors on days like that. So we're going to have to work through that. But our ventilation systems are designed to bring in fresh air. We are looking at different filters now. We're very consistent at changing the filters on a normal basis. But we're looking at different types of filters to see if there's a filter that will work within our system that may be a little bit more effective at protecting us and cleaning the air around us.
Hey, Scott.
Yep.
I have a few questions. I couldn't unmute myself. The first one was, at this time, do we have any idea which age group and how many classes would need to be held in all-purpose rooms, or is it too early for that?
It's too early. We don't
Okay.
know that yet. Right now, if our numbers work out perfectly, which means every class that's scheduled gets cut directly in half, we should be good. We know that that's not going to work out perfectly, so that's really going to be a last-minute call. In terms of elementary, pretty easy because the kids are consistent in one group all day. So if I need to, I can probably reach out to a parent or two and slide a student the other direction. And that's why, and I'll talk about this at the end, we're going to collect some of that information, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but at the end of this, we'll talk about the method we're going to use next to collect some information from our families. But at the secondary level, that's going to be a little trickier because even though my period A class may be perfectly balanced, when that group gets up and goes to period B, things could go, things could get out of whack. So we're going to look at those. We're going to look at those situations on a case-by-case basis and move classes where we need to move them.
My second question was just about how is it possible to limit numbers of students in the bathroom, like especially in middle school and high school? Is that going to be possible? Or,
yep,
I mean, I know staff is already going to be completely overstressed as it is.
Yeah, that is something that is that comes up. I think that comes up on a slide here at some point. But yeah, that is something that we are going to do at the secondary level. Is we are going to have a process to only allow one student in the bathroom at a time. That is a recommendation from the Department of Education's guidance. So hopefully, with one student at a time, that will also encourage our high school, middle school students to get in and get out of the bathroom as quickly as they can. There's nobody to linger with and have a conversation with. So. That will be part of the plan.
Scott, this is Fiona. I had a question.
Yep.
On a previous slide, you said that the custodians would not be able to clean in between each group, but cleaning products would be available. So who's doing that cleaning? Staff members?
Staff and students.
Staff and students.
Yep. I mean, we're talking cleaning. We're talking about a wipe, a Lysol wipe, sanitizing wipe, whatever it is, just wiping things down. I mean, we're not talking about, students taking out mops and buckets, but wiping things down.
Thank you.
Yep. Anything else from board members? Okay. So the next area. Get out of here real quick. Did I make sure I hit everything? Okay, I did get to that. All right. Sometimes I hit the keyboard here and I think I'm missing slides. So the next area that we have to look at is transportation. The Collingswood and Oaklyn, both Collingswood and Oaklyn outsource our transportation through the Camden County Ed Services Commission. At the end of last year or over this summer, the Ed Services Commission canceled all of their bus contracts and are rebidding them at this time with all of the sanitation and distancing protocols included. So we're planning on between 22 and 26 students on a bus at a time. And that is part of the bid specs. We are very fortunate in Collingswood and Oaklyn that we don't bus many kids. Imagine being a district that buses 10,000 kids. I have no idea how they're going to get students to school. We are fortunate in that we don't bus many students, but it will be a challenge even for the students we do bus. So when it's possible, we're gonna, most of our busing involves our students with special needs, and typically there is an aide on that bus. So we will be trying to put an aide on that bus, on the buses, to try to ensure the social distancing and behavior and all those types of things that are happening on a bus. Obviously, there's a limit to what a bus driver can do while he or she is safely operating the bus. Mrs. Coleman will monitor all those contracts and safety procedures. Our experience so far has been that the bus companies actually reach out to us and ask us what we want them to do. So that's a positive, I believe. But if restrictions do drive up the cost of busing, in the state of New Jersey, the district may offer aid in lieu of transportation. It's a payment to parents to transport the students themselves. It is only offered when we cannot transport the students, but that is an option that we can investigate. So in one of the upcoming piece of information and surveys that come out, we're going to ask parents who are entitled to transportation, and oftentimes that is in Collingswood and Oaklyn, that's often through an IEP, encourage those parents to transport their own students, anybody who can. And this is really part of the act of being a community, is that for every student that a parent can transport themselves, you are opening up a seat for a student whose parent perhaps can't transport them. We have families in both towns who don't have cars. They just can't transport their own kids. So we are going to ask that as part of an upcoming survey. Student flow, entry, exit, common areas, and screening. To promote safety and social distancing, our principals will be designing entrances to the schools and timeframes which students will enter. So when we get to the schedule coming up, you're going to see there's a window for school arrival and a window for student dismissal at the end of the day. That window is there purposefully to allow us to schedule times for students to come. Screening checkpoint 1 is going to be on the family, so staff members and students. I'm probably during this presentation going to say students a lot, but much of this also applies to staff members, including myself. Staff members and students will be issued a screener to self-check prior to arriving at school in the morning. Nurses will develop educational materials to share with families that include signs and symptoms, things that are easy to understand and easy to look for, to encourage that home screening. And the overarching message is, if your student is exhibiting any of these symptoms, please keep them home. The last thing that anyone needs to worry about this year is an attendance policy. We can decide tonight that no one's going to get perfect attendance or everyone's going to get perfect attendance. It doesn't matter to me. The last thing we need to worry about is an attendance policy. So if your child is sick, it does not feel well, it's exhibiting some of those symptoms, please keep them home. The second checkpoint will happen at the school, and upon arrival, we're going to screen the kids very quickly. And again, more information about exactly what that will look like will be forthcoming. But the nurses are going to train the folks who will be administering the temperature checks when the kids come in. With the early elementary students, we know that our kindergartners may not be able to answer the question, have you been around anyone who's been out of the country in the last 14 days? So we're going to encourage our parents to bring the students to school and remain with them until the screening is complete. So that word volunteers does not mean random people off the street. Volunteers from our staff will be used to perform the screenings as the students enter the building, and those folks will be trained by our nurses in how to do that. It's not a highly involved procedure, but we will have some training for them, as well as also some training on the importance of privacy and respect. The movements in our buildings will be minimized at the preschool and the elementary level. At our middle school and high school levels, principals will design and mark one-way hallways and staircases for our students, again, to try to get the flow of traffic moving in one area. That should actually be helped out by the fact that students do not have to go to their lockers in between classes. Screening PPE, response to students and staff with symptoms. So screening is covered on the previous 2 slides. I talked about that. Because of the screening, students are going to have a window which they have to enter the school. Talked about that. Students will not be admitted late to school. Once that window closes and the people who are doing the screening are either teaching or in the nurse's office or in the counseling office or whatever their jobs are, we're not going to have anybody to keep screening all day. So that doesn't mean if your time to get to school is between 8:30 and 9, let's say you're assigned between 8:30 and 8:40. If you get there at 8:45, it's okay. But you can't get there at 9:15. We have nobody to screen you. So we're going to ask students who can't get there on time to just stay home and be remote that day. So students will not be admitted late. And if students leave during the school day, doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, all the million reasons that students leave, they're not going to be readmitted back to school. So once they're out, they're kind of going to be out for the day. And they won't be readmitted after that time. Any staff member or student with a fever or other symptoms will be immediately isolated and requested to be picked up. We're going to really lean on our parents for cooperation on this one. We're not going to call you unless there's a real reason, to come in and pick your child up. Any student or staff member who is sent home may only return with a doctor's note or a negative test result. There is an entire flow chart that I received today that we will publish. It'll be public. That we'll publish that has a lot of those. What if this happens? If then, here's what you do. So we'll get that out there. Not the easiest thing in the world to follow, but hopefully it will help to answer some of the questions. But testing When we send anybody home, testing will be encouraged, but it is important to realize that we can't mandate testing. I can't send a student home and mandate that they go be tested. All the guidance that we've received so far is that that is not permitted. If a student or staff member tests positive and we are notified, and by that I mean we're notified, that notification is really going to have to come from our families or from the health department, but that's a lot of moving parts. Imagine that you go to your doctor or a hospital or Rite Aid, one of the Rite Aid or whatever other testing centers are out there. They are then reporting a positive result to the county health department. That means that they have to report the positive result to the health department, and the health department has to know that that student is a student in our school, and they get that information back to us. And maybe I'm just not trusting. I don't believe all those pieces are going to fall into place. So if a student tests positive or a staff member tests positive, it's really going to be important that we as a school district are notified by the student or by the family or the staff member, so that we can make sure that we are able to protect everybody. This is a piece that changed as of today, not a change I'm necessarily happy with, but our understanding as of today is if the county health department is notified that a student tests positive, they will conduct the contact tracing, which we're going to get to in a second, and that has been the case all along. The county health department will send a letter to families to let them know that a student in your school has tested positive. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work. I'd feel much better if we had control over that. And I'll dig for further clarification on that. But on the information that we received just today, it is the county health department that's actually going to issue those notifications. What I understand as of today is that that is they do not only are they taking care of it, so to speak, but they prefer that we not do it. So we're going to push a little bit on that and find out where we can get what we can do to kind of bring that. I feel much better if we send out a very generic letter to our families in the school that there's somebody, I think that's responsible. And I think it's going to happen much quickly. Yep.
Can I ask a question then? So then does that mean that the school district will have to be providing them with all the student body information?
Yep. One of the slides coming up is about contact tracing, and on that, I'll talk a little bit about the types of contacts that are considered high risk or at risk. And the health department, our only role as of today in this is that the health department may reach out to us or will reach out to us to say which students have fit these criteria. So if you're in a cohort of 11 other students, then we would give them the names and contact information for those 11 other students. But we are not going to, I don't think, we're not giving the names of everybody in the school, just of those 11 other students who are in that cohort.
I guess my question is just in terms of sending the letter out.
Yep.
Like, how will they have all of the names and addresses to send the letter to?
I think, hopefully when I went over that, I didn't sound very optimistic about that. I don't know. I'm gonna push on that one. I just, not that I don't trust them. I don't know that they have the staff to get that done.
Yeah. Okay.
And I, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they have this down to a science. I don't know that. But it seems that their real push right now is for them to do the notifications and not us. And I'm not sure I completely understand that. And if we did this presentation yesterday, you would have heard me say a very different thing. And that's when this was designed. So, when I get that information, I will get it out to everybody. We'll get it out to everybody in the community.
Dr. Oswald, I had a question on the previous slide.
Okay.
I know you said that they're going to be sending out that flow chart, but in a circumstance where a staff member is sent home,
yep.
A doctor's note was required.
Yep.
Or what's the expectation that the staff member make an appointment with their own physician? Yep. They provide a note, and they won't. That staff member would not be allowed back until there's a doctor's note.
Yes. So I think one thing that's confusing here is that think back last year or 5 years ago, people got sick every day. People get sick in schools, kids get sick every day, and those illnesses have not gone away. So sneezing, colds, the regular flu, whatever, a stomach virus, those things are still going to happen. So right now we're taking the extra precaution because we don't know what's causing the illness. We are taking the extra precaution to say that once a staff member or student is sent home from school because they're exhibiting a symptom, then the two options really are go to the doctor and get a note that says, yes, you had that symptom, but it wasn't because of COVID, and bring it back, or go get tested and bring us a negative test result, in which case we know you may have had something else. It doesn't matter what the something else is. We know at that point it's not COVID.
Is the staff member almost going to have to get tested though? Because would your general physician necessarily know whether those were symptoms directly related to COVID or not?
I do not have the answer to that.
Okay.
So I would think that if you came in, I would think if I went to my doctor and I was exhibiting symptoms, that my doctor would send me to be tested, but I'm not a doctor, so I can't answer that.
Thanks.
Oswald. Question here about notifications. So if a student is sick, is there a designated person in the building that they would be notifying? Is that their teacher or principal?
Yeah, we will send that out. I don't know the answer to that. It's either going to be their teacher or the school nurse. And I would prefer that it be the school nurse, but again, depending on the numbers, I don't know that we're going to be good with one person just doing all that, particularly at the secondary level where the numbers get pretty large. So when we send out our plan, that'll be in there. We have to make that decision about who's going to be notified.
And it's just that, is there any guidance on notification if someone in their direct family is sick or that they are exposed as far as notifying the school?
Yeah, so let me try to explain this. It probably works better with pictures, but the guidance is, and this is kind of what I call the 6 degrees of separation guidance. If I spent the weekend with a friend and that friend went and was tested today or got test result back today and came back positive, perhaps asymptomatic but positive, then I should quarantine, and I should let the school know that happened, especially if I'm a teacher in the school, that I'm quarantining for that reason. The teacher, the staff member is going to have to let us know that. If I'm a student and that's in that same scenario, and I was with somebody who absolutely tested positive, then that student's family should let the school know that that's the case. If, however, I was with a person who tested positive and somebody else was with me, I haven't tested positive, I was just with somebody. If I was with a person who tested positive and somebody else is with me, then the red flag only goes up if I'm experiencing symptoms, or obviously if I get tested and come back positive. But prior to me coming back positive, if that happens, then we kind of only wave a red flag if I'm experiencing symptoms after being exposed to somebody who was positive. But it's not that person that I was with also has to quarantine, as does the person they were with the next day. Like we're not jumping that many leaps out. So we will come up with a kind of a protocol for who needs to report to us, just to be on the safe side. But understand that the notifications will go out to whether it comes from us or the health department. The notifications are going to go out to the people who were within 6 feet of the positive person, student, teacher, whoever, within 6 feet for more than, as of today, it's 10 minutes. Yesterday it was 15 minutes, but let's go with 10 minutes. If I'm the student who's within 6 feet of you for more than 10 minutes, then I'm considered at risk. And then that notification would go to you that, if I tested positive and you were within 6 feet of me for more than 10 minutes, that notification would go to you. As of sometime relatively recently, the mask thing is irrelevant at that point. It used to be you had to be within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes without any protection, without any PPE. That's gone away. So now it's just within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes. And then you're considered somebody that we should notify. If our plan works, which we know it's not going to work perfectly, if our plan works perfectly, nobody would need to be notified because nobody's going to be within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes. We know that no plan is perfect, and we know that there's going to be hiccups and flaws in the plan, but we are planning at least so that would not have to happen. Else? Good. School staff members, students, and visitors must wear face coverings. Visitors, if you come into the school, have to have an appointment to come in. So if you need to see a counselor, your child's counselor, child study team member, anybody else in the school, have to have an appointment to come in. We're not going to take people walking up. Visitors without mask, with or without appointment. If you come without a mask, you're going to be denied entry. Once this process is finalized, all these questions that are coming up now, which are good questions, we will review all of the protocols with our school doctor to make sure that she is comfortable with everything. So we'll have guidance from the health department, the work of our own school nurses, putting all this together into a plan that makes sense. And then once we have a plan that we think makes sense, we'll turn it over to our school physician and have her look at it and make sure she's comfortable as well. Good. All right. Contact tracing. We had a couple questions about this. So our nurses are going to develop materials to educate our families on the importance of contact tracing. That just means those materials are really going to be focused on if you are to get a call from somebody who is doing contact tracing at the health department or whoever employs the contact tracers now, that it's very important to cooperate with them, not hold things back, not share important information. Contact tracing will be responsibility. This is the Camden County Department of Health. And Denise, I think you asked this question. We'll provide names and information to assist them with that contact tracing. I'm sure that we'll provide the students' names and their contact information, their phone numbers and addresses and things. I just don't know how many folks they have on staff that are going to be able to handle these in a timely manner. So we're going to work on that. Families should notify the school nurse if a child tests positive or is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. So if the child tests positive or is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 after being exposed to somebody who tests positive, you should notify the school nurse. And that may change. It may be the teacher, but we're going to try it, I think, at the nurse. Okay. Facilities cleaning. So we have hospital-grade disinfectants that we've been using ever since March, and cleaning products. They'll be used for daytime, evening, and deep cleaning. And then we have purchased electrostatic sprayers for each of our schools. So those are the sprayers that we started using back in the spring. Our custodians are going to go through a training protocol next week, I guess, the first week of August, to make sure that they understand the importance of the role in all of this, as well as the protocols for all of the cleanings during both the school day, after school, and our remote learning day. Procedures are going to be put into place to minimize the need to touch traditional high-touch surfaces. So things like doorknobs, light switches, doorknobs, trying to keep the classroom doors open, will help us not touch doorknobs as often as is typically the case in a school day. Light switches, leaving the lights on. Water fountains, I probably have sent out some information. If not, it will be coming out to encourage families to send their students in with refillable water bottles or disposable water bottles, whatever works for your family. But we will have, in each of our schools, we will have the bottle refill stations, which don't require any touch. And obviously with keeping our students, particularly at the elementary level, in their classrooms for much of the day and minimizing movement around the school as much as possible, there won't be a need to touch railings. But in several of our schools, we have stairs that go up and down, and we teach the kids to grab onto the railing every time. So we will be cleaning those throughout the day as well. High touch surfaces, again, will be cleaned throughout the day. Bathrooms will be cleaned and sanitized daily and more frequently whenever possible. The number of students permitted in the bathrooms are going to be limited throughout the day. At the secondary level, very likely to be one student in each bathroom at a time. Staff and students will be encouraged to bring water from home. Just talked about that. Touchless water refill stations are being installed in all the schools. Talked a little bit about physical barriers at the beginning here, and back on that other slide, I didn't click on it, but when I post this online, there'll be a slide, it's within the first couple of slides, that you can actually go click on and see the physical barriers that we purchased. They will go on the desks, so they'll be actually around the students. They can be sprayed and wiped daily. They will be cleaned every night, but in between classes, changing classes, the middle school and high school, they can be sprayed down and wiped. Hand sanitizer is available at the entrances in the hallways. We did buy stations for our playgrounds, stands and stations for our playgrounds, and in each classroom, either in a dispenser or in a pump form. Sanitizing wipes or other cleaning products will be available in our classrooms. And again, we have nowhere near enough custodians to clean everything all day long, every classroom all day long, in between class changes. Staff will be trained on expectations and the need to monitor, obviously, the use of sanitizer by our youngest students. That is something that we on a routine basis, heavily discouraged is hand sanitizer among our little guys. But in this case, it's going to have to be reality, so they will be carefully monitored by our staff. Meals and food service, we're going to get to the schedule in a bit, but we're not going to be serving lunches during the school day. The restrictions on lunch service are just too great. If we were to attempt to serve lunches, we would likely start serving at around 9 a.m. and not finish up till 2. Because of the protocols with number of students in the cafeterias as well as cleaning in between. Students will be encouraged to bring a healthy snack, something simple to school, nothing with elaborate packaging, nothing that requires the teacher to take the lid off. Our kindergarten, first grade teachers can tell you horror stories about those, but something that's healthy and is pretty simple packaging. As of today, FRPM is just free reduced price meals. That's what that means. As of today, only our free reduced price meal students are eligible for free breakfast and free lunch, and only for 5 days. And I'm putting that here because if you are a family that took advantage over the summer or late spring, somewhere around the end of April, the U.S. Department of Agriculture changed their guidelines to include free and reduced price meals for every student, whether you were eligible or not. You were eligible during that period. And for 7 days of meals. They have now pulled back on that and are going with 5 days of meals and only for those students who are eligible. We are looking at a schedule right now on our remote learning day that provides our families with breakfast and lunch for 5 days. They will be available during school hours if that's what works for your family, and that could be kind of early to late afternoon, as well as an evening pickup window for our families to allow us to serve everyone who is eligible for free and reduced price meals. If we distribute our meals this way, it allows us to serve better quality products. If we hand bags to students as they're on their way out of the school, we're very limited in the types of products we can serve. Everything has to be shelf stable. We have to our assumption is the student's not going right home. So this actually allows us to give better quality lunches and breakfast to our students and to their families. NutriServe does really well on the health side and on the sanitation side, and are working with their staff right now. They've developed protocols and they're working with training their staff right now on those protocols. All right, we're still on conditions for learning, and this is still one of the first 10 mandated areas we have to address. So recess and physical education. So our traditional recess that surrounds lunch at the elementary level will not be scheduled this year. Teachers may certainly take their students outdoors for exercise, learning, and change of scenery. Uses of outdoor spaces will be encouraged. We are currently looking at the possibility of some canopies, some big tents or canopies on our playgrounds that we can use for some outdoor learning space. Any groups or cohorts outside also obviously have to maintain the 6-foot distancing within their group as well as between groups. So if the first and the second grade happen to be out on the playground at the same time, which is perfectly fine, they can't be intermixing. They'll have to be kept apart. And we'll use playground markers and cones and chalk and markings and all those types of things to make sure that we maintain that distancing. Students will wash and sanitize their hands before they go back inside if they're outside with their class. Playground equipment, which in the district we call the toys, but that's the equipment that kids climb over and slide down and all those things, will be off limits until October 1st at least. We will take a look right before October 1st and see kind of where we stand in this. And my suspicion is that's going to be extended, but we're gonna close it down for right now until October 1st. Use of supplies during phys ed or any type of teacher recess when the teacher takes the students outside will be minimized. If something is absolutely necessary between uses, we will disinfect them between uses. But you shouldn't expect a lot of throwing balls back and forth and things that require 2 students to handle any type of supply or equipment at the same time. It is in here. Locker rooms in the middle school and high school will be closed at least through October 1st, and I suspect well beyond that. But right now we're making that decision through October 1st. Field trips, extracurricular activities, and use of facilities by outside groups. No after-school co-curricular activities will be scheduled until at least October 1st. Those are the non-athletic activities. Athletics will follow the NJSIA guidelines, which begin some limited conditioning practices, have started some limited conditioning practices, and they will not play, the NJSIA has pushed off the fall season until at least October 1st as well. So I think there's one sport, might be girls tennis, that starts a day or two earlier, but pretty much everybody's pushed back till October 1st. School pictures will be delayed indefinitely. We will just not high on the priority list right now. So those are going to be delayed. Senior pictures will be scheduled. Our photographers who do the student senior pictures are pretty good at this and know what they need to do. Senior pictures are one student at a time by a scheduled appointment. They have their set time. We can clean in between. That really should not be an issue. No field trips are scheduled until at least February 1st, so we won't be having any field trips until at least February 1st. No assemblies or other large group in-school gatherings until February 1st. No outside groups, I'm sorry, will be able to use our facilities until February 1st. And that includes some I guess, late fall, winter recreation programs. So that's indoor basketball, indoor wrestling. And again, if the situation changes vastly between now and then, we can certainly revisit that date. But right now, we're just getting everybody ready for that. Use of outdoor facilities we'll review on a case-by-case basis. There are some guidelines in place by the government, by the governor, by executive order. Anybody who wants to use our facilities outside is going to have to follow those guidelines as well. PTA meetings certainly within our schools can happen remotely. They will not happen in our schools. If you want to go hang out at somebody's house, just don't tell us about it. Other annual events like book fairs, parties, library checkout. Again, our goal here is to minimize the in and out in our schools. So those things are going to be canceled until further notice. Back to school nights will likely be remote. One of the areas that came up, one of the questions that's come up several times, excuse me, excuse me. One of the questions that's come up several times is about the opportunity to meet teachers prior to the beginning of the school year for students who are staying remote. You know, depending on what back to school night looks like, that's just not something that we've tackled yet. That is in the plans. Never have I said that's not going to happen. What I can tell you right now is I don't know how that's going to happen, because as much as we'd like to answer everyone's wishes, we still have to work within contractual guidelines. And you know, our teachers have their own families and their own home lives as well, so we have to keep that in mind. But you know, we certainly have it on our radar that we would like our teachers, our students, regardless of whether they're staying remote or coming into school, to meet their teachers, and also for our families and our parents to meet the teachers during some form of back to school night, and that may be a remote back to school night. Fundraisers that don't involve social gatherings, we've had a couple of different groups selling some things. They're fine as long as it doesn't require you to collect large groups of people in one area. All
Scott,
right.
this is Reagan. I have a quick question
Sure.
about field trips. Does that include the 18 to 21-year-old program and the vocations program in the high school? I know they do a lot of stuff that we say are field trips, even though really it's part of their school day. So I just wasn't sure if that counted.
Right. They will. We have not talked about that, so that's a really great question. But I would imagine following these guidelines, they're going to be very limited in terms of what they can, what experiences they can take advantage of in the community. So community-based learning, community-based instruction is a big part of their program. So we will we'll take a close look at that and only schedule things that we're pretty sure are safe.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. That is actually the end. The previous slide is actually the end of the first 10 points that we have to address as part of our plan. We have many slides to go here, but those are the end of the first 10 mandated points that we have to address. The next piece under social emotional learning, under conditions for learning, is social emotional learning, and the first piece of this in the state document is actually focusing on the staff members, kind of under the umbrella that broken teachers can't teach and they can't help other students heal. So our administrative and our coaching team is working on a 3-tiered model to support our teachers. This isn't about students yet, but to support our teachers. Our coaches, which is our instructional coaches in the district, are reading the book Onward, Cultivating Emotional Resilience in Educators. Really good book. Has as part of it some really solid, sound activities and that our teachers and our professionals can take part in. So not only are we planning some of those activities to plan some obviously remotely, but planning some of those activities, but we're actually scheduling some time into our week with the teachers to work with them and get through some of those activities, work them through some of those activities as well. The nurses and counselors are available, obviously, for our teachers who may need some additional support, as our administrative team. The NJEA has a pretty solid employee assistance program that they offer to staff. I don't know that a lot of our NJEA members even understand that that's there, so that's something that we'll work with our associations to spread that word. And today I learned about another employee assistance program that's apparently very reasonable in the area, so we're going to look at that and dig into that a little bit too. Just to make sure that our staff members, without our staff, none of this plan comes into play. So we have to keep them as healthy as possible and in as solid a mindset as possible. Our district staff participated in trauma-informed practices training last year. That was brought up at the beginning of tonight's presentation. So we do have that background to fall back on. Dr. Whitehouse and the child study team and I are going to work on a kind of a cheat sheet to sort of bring back to the forefront some of those strategies that we discussed last year. We were about 3/4, maybe a little more through our program last year when we shut down. We did do some remote training at the end of the year through some video training, but we are going to go back and kind of pull out the elements of our trauma-informed practices training that most apply to this situation. And then our nurses, counselors, child study team members, school psychologists, and social work interns are available to address our Tier 1 and Tier 2 student needs. Tier 1 needs are really going to be addressed in our classrooms or in our special area classrooms. Tier 2 is often through our school psychology interns. This year, we're fortunate we have a handful of social work interns as well. So that was completely coincidental, but timing is everything, and I think we timed that pretty well. We also have in Collingswood, we have our Jefferson Behavioral Health Program that's available after school hours to our families. That is the November ballot question, I guess it was known as last year. We have had families who took advantage of that pretty much out of the gate last winter when we kicked off. And even throughout this remote learning, they have been staying in touch with their Jefferson counselors, and that's working pretty well, even though they've been doing some telecounseling, but they have stayed in touch, and I think that the results are going to show there. So all of that's available to our staff at the top and then our students at the bottom. Continuing on social emotional learning, our elementary team is working on some classroom embedded SEL strategies as part of our routine curriculum work. Also completely coincidentally, this was built into our curriculum cycle this year. So we have some of our real go-to sort of experts in this area working on curriculum. Could not have been timed better, but we have to get our staff trained in what they're to do in the classrooms and things that they can do as a routine part of their instructional program. We also are going to work with our special area teachers to focus on SEL. We know in things like our music classes, we're not going to have kids singing out loud. It's probably one of the worst things that can happen. So what can our special area teachers in music and phys ed, health and phys ed, and perhaps some art do in the area of SEL? So we're going to provide some training to them during the opening days of school for staff. Middle school and high school team is going to work with our health and phys ed teachers to embed SEL strategies into their activities. A couple slides ago, we noted that the locker rooms would be closed, so there's not going to be high intensity activities going on. So our health and phys ed teachers will kind of take a double approach here, focusing obviously on the hygiene piece, which is critical, as well as some of the social emotional health and social emotional learning pieces. So those folks can serve a major role in keeping our students both physically and socially and mentally healthy. We have school counselors, our child study team members, and other expert teachers will serve as resource peoples. We're very fortunate in the district, both districts, that we have some folks in districts who this is just sort of their lifestyle. They are really into mindfulness and yoga and all those types of things. So, we're not going to worry about somebody having a certification as a counselor. We're going to really look to those folks who have expertise in some of these areas just because it happens to be their lifestyle, their way of life. And then part of our training protocol will be to train our staff members during those first 4 days of staff-only school. School climate and culture, utilizing the strengths of our staff. I just talked a little bit about that and not letting certifications get in our way, but allowing people to bring their own passions and sharing those passions with staff members who may have different passions. And certainly sending an important message to everybody in our districts, staff members, our families, everybody, that we have to worry more about wellness, mental health, wellness, than seat time and attendance. I hope if there's nothing else you take away from this presentation, is that we are not going to sweat the attendance thing. So please understand that. Worry about your kids' health, worry that they're doing well. That's your number one priority. If they're not well someday, keep them home from school. Nobody should be shooting for the perfect attendance award. By learning about and using the strengths of all staff members, I think that we can do great things as a district. Last year when we left in March, we sort of followed the 3 C's of collaboration, consistency, and communication. We're going to try to keep that up this year, having our staff members collaborate with each other, builds a team atmosphere. I think that's actually one of the biggest benefits of the spring is that staff members from different schools, second grade teachers, were forced to work together and really learned how much further they could go working as a team. So we're gonna lean heavily on that. Our consistency piece, again, 3rd grade, we'll be teaching pretty much the same content throughout the week, and that will allow us to be to free up some of our teacher time by sharing some of the responsibilities and free some of the stress off of our teachers to believe that they don't have to do everything themselves, that they'll have a team approach at this. And then communication, we're going to continue communicating between them to make sure everybody's staying on the same page, and then also communicating out to our families in the community. I think we're getting toward the end of our conditions for learning part here, but multi-tiered system of support, that's a bunch of jargon we use in education, which basically means we focus on our students, not only academic well-being and academic growth, but also their social emotional well-being. Also their social emotional well-being, and understanding that the success of our students depends heavily on those 2 things working side by side and hand in hand. So that's kind of the basics. That's a foundation of our plan. So those are the roots from which we are growing this whole thing. So our elementary teachers will be using pre-assessments, embedded pre-assessments in English language arts and math. They're already built into the program. Your students will be assessed without them ever knowing it. Will be assessed without them ever knowing it. So those are some formative assessments so that we know where our students are when they come back to us. Our secondary teachers are going to use Common Lit and Imagine Math, again, as part of their instructional program. And those programs will allow us to know where the gaps are in our instruction. Accelerated teaching, I'll talk about in a minute. But it allows us, our focus for this year is going to be teaching grade level content and standards while filling in the gaps as needed. So if you have a 3rd grader this year, understanding in 2nd grade, he or she did not get everything that they would have traditionally gotten in 2nd grade. We are going to move forward with the 3rd grade curriculum. And when the teacher recognizes that there are gaps in the student's knowledge because of what happened last year, they will stop and fill those gaps in. But we are not going to try to go back and reteach 2nd grade. We're going to move ahead and fill in those gaps just in time. I'll talk about that in a slide or two. Talk about that more in a slide or two. Our mental health screeners, we are currently looking at a universal mental health screener that will be used with our students to identify any students who may have some red flags on the mental health side. Is there students who have excessive worrying? They're worrying about things. They're nervous, they're anxious. Those feelings are going to be pretty normal as we come back to school. Are there students who are, those feelings and their status with those areas are throwing up red flags? So we'll have a mental health screener for those. And then obviously if any red flags are noticed, that we will collaborate with our families to try to get our students the help that they need, whether that help is in school or outside of school. Okay, conditions for learning wraparound supports. So we have in both districts, a 3-tier SEL mental health model that's well defined. It is what we've been working on now for a couple of years. So that I'm not seeing as a major concern. That has been established across our districts. Our nurses have information on low cost and no cost primary care, medical and dental services. That's nothing new. Our nurses are really good at that. Families and community members are represented in the decision-making process through our work groups. And our early release of preliminary plans, so the letter that we sent out a couple weeks ago on the 13th of July was really to give families a heads up about our thinking. And I've gotten a bit of feedback since that letter went out as well. And then we did another question and answer session maybe 2 weeks ago. We are doing this tonight, and we will likely do another one sometime in mid-August. So we're really taking into account, even if I tell you tonight I don't have an answer to that, that doesn't mean we're not writing it down. And we're going to try to find or develop an answer and try to meet as many needs as we possibly can. Food service is also in this area, but we addressed that previously. Quality childcare, I can't say this enough. This is going to be our biggest challenge. Just Kids will operate in all of our schools after school. They will operate for the entirety of when we let students out of school up until 6 o'clock. That part's going to be relatively normal in terms of their hours. Just Kids is considered a daycare. They operate under the daycare guidelines, and the daycare guidelines are very strict. So Just Kids, given the spaces they use in our schools, will probably be limited to around 20 students in their after-school programs. So they are not, Just Kids is not going to be able to meet, alone is not going to be able to meet the needs of the community in terms of childcare. We are going to, in our survey, I'm going to talk about at the very end of this presentation, we're going to ask families about their need for Just Kids and try to really get a more firm number on how many people absolutely need it, how many families need it. And we are going to ask our families if you are, we have families who use Just Kids as a convenience, and that's fine during the regular school year. A parent, an older sibling, somebody may be home, but they want the student to stay at school for whatever reason for a bit longer, to really consider that before you sign up for Just Kids this year, because you may be knocking out a family who really doesn't have another choice. Just Kids will offer a full daycare option for parents who need full care on the days their children are remote. So when we get to that slide in a couple slides, Just Kids is willing to offer, or is going to offer. So if you have ever participated in our summer day camp in the district, it would be something similar to that, where they would take the students from morning until probably 6 o'clock. We are looking at possibly opening additional sections in that on the full remote day, and fingers crossed, I hope to have an answer to that question before we send guidance home by the end of the week. So these things, a lot of discussion right now. I have a pretty firm feeling about what we're going to do, but I want to confirm with Just Kids before I send it out in writing. So again, Just Kids also has their own COVID-19 protocols, and one thing I can promise you in a 60-slide presentation, one thing I can promise you is they are not going to be able to meet the need. Not going to happen. So families should begin planning now, and reaching out to other community organizations. If you're a member of a church in town, either towns, anything that they can do. They often have large spaces that may not be used during the week. Families getting together in pods. I keep hearing this pod idea. How can we help each other out? Those are all going to be important parts of this plan. All right, that is the end of that section. That is the longest section, I promise. But from the board members, are there any outstanding questions? I know some of you asked along the way, but anything that I did not address that you have questions about?
Hey, Scott, this is Bob.
Sure.
Bob, I was just wondering, you said Just Kids limited to about 20. What do they normally handle?
Bob, in Oaklyn, I'm not sure what they had last year. What I do know is in Collingswood, their largest number was at Tatum, and I think it was upwards of 60 kids, probably 62 kids that they had in the after school program. What I did not mention is we are going to include in our survey, and the survey will be next week, but we're going to include in our survey a question to our families about morning care, Just Kids care, afternoon Just Kids care, and the full day Just Kids care. So there's going to be 3 different Just Kids questions in that survey. If we can establish a large enough need in the morning, then we will try to offer Just Kids at each of our locations in the morning. Last year, what we did was Just Kids AM was at Oaklyn, was also at Tatum, where it only serves Tatum students and had enough to serve Tatum students. And then Sharp handled the overflow from all the other schools. We are not going to be able to do that this year. There's not going to be busing to bus the kids around to all the schools. So what we're going to try our best to do is offer Just Kids AM care in each of our elementary schools. But to do that, we need to know that we have enough families to sustain it. So we'll know that by hopefully the end of next week, when we get those survey answers back.
Scott, it's Chris Riley. What about things like fire drills and evacuation drills?
As of now, from the Department of Education, believe it or not, those things are all still required. In speaking to our Collingswood first responders, they're being pretty creative, and I have to reach out to Chief Moore in Oaklyn. They're going to be pretty creative in what those are going to look like. So instead of having students actually evacuate the building, we may bring firemen in to do some lessons with the students on what that evacuation would look like, to try to satisfy those requirements. But as of now, that is not a requirement. To my knowledge, to my understanding, that is not a requirement that's being relaxed. but it might look different, may look very different.
Okay.
Obviously, if you're aware of our in-school drills, our emergency drills, we do run a couple drills a year of active shooter drills. And with those, our students go through a protocol. I'm not going to share it, but it's not exactly a secret, but the students pretty much gather together in a very close area. That is not, we are not going to be able to do that, obviously. So
Right.
a lot of those typical protocol and routines that we do is just going to have to be different. So it does seem, and I'll reach out to Chief Moore tomorrow, it does seem like we have kind of our police and fire are on board with how they can meet those requirements without, going overboard.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So the leadership and planning, I think, is going to answer a lot of additional questions. Probably some of the biggest questions of the night are going to come under this category. Requirements to reopen. What we know today, public health trends, at least as of today, in New Jersey, support reopening. That will really be a state, or I guess it could be a county decision. My suspicion is it's going to be a state decision if that should change. But I suppose if in Camden County we see a sudden outbreak, the county could make the decision to close its schools. They did that at the beginning of this process. I think it was, maybe it might have been Bergen County, one of the northern counties, actually closed schools before the state did. So that decision will come from the state or the county. Currently, schools are expected to reopen for modified in-person instruction, and I think as late as today, the governor reinforced that. Due to social distancing requirements, we will operate on a reduced capacity. Districts need to be prepared to transition to full remote on a moment's notice. Obviously, we will do our best to clean and deep clean and clean as much as we possibly can, and we will have signage in our schools to promote distancing, face coverings, washing, hand sanitizing, as well as some of that movement around our buildings, particularly at the secondary level with one-way hallways, stairwells, those types of things. So those things are all in consideration right now and are being planned right now. So clear communications protocols. So flow of information about specific topics. So what we will be doing, have not done yet, but what we will be doing is deciding what information will come from me directly as a district and what information is going to come from your building principal. So there's going to be things in each school, obviously, that need to come from your principals. I am not going to decide what door kids are going to enter in the morning. The principals will decide that, and they will get that information to you. Communication with the health department regarding emergency school closings. This is nothing out of the ordinary on a routine basis. If we have an outbreak of any type of an illness in our schools, we are in pretty routine communication with the health department to decide whether that outbreak mandates that we close our schools. So that part is pretty automatic for us. We have to accept that this plan is not going to be perfect from the start. We will collect feedback as we go, and we'll have to make changes based on the experience. I can tell you we are putting a lot of work right now, and there's going to be in the upcoming slides, there's going to be some slides where my answer is going to be, I don't have an answer for that, because we're putting a lot of work right now into making sure that the plan we have in place is going to work under any circumstance. The last thing we want to do is start in September, get a plan up and running that's running well, and then have to retrain everybody on October 1st when we all of a sudden have to close. We're going to try to put something together that's going to be almost not dependent on whether students are sitting in front of us at home all the time. We're going to do our best with that. That is my goal. Key considerations when we have to make plans, when we have to make changes, and we will have to make changes, is will our changes encourage distancing and discourage cohort mixing? So if you think about our students entering school during the day, and we talked about having time frames when kids come in and bringing them in shifts and all those types of things. If we find out on the first 3 days of school that's not working, and we don't see a path toward, in a couple of days people will get used to it and it will work, which is often the case, then we may have to change something there. And one of our driving forces is going to be, is it going to encourage the distancing and discourage social cohort mixing? Is it going to improve our hygiene practices? Is it going to impact mental health in any kind of way? And how is it going to impact our instruction, our learning, our family engagement? How is it going to impact those things in terms of disruption at home? We know, and we are fully aware, this is not easy for us, and it's even harder for our families at home. So we're aware of that, and we want to do our best to make sure that we don't throw you a curveball unless it's absolutely necessary, unless we just can't avoid it. So we're going to deliver our plans and our expectations through our families through multiple media. That means we'll deliver them through text messages and emails and through social media and on our website, all those kinds of things, all those avenues. Scheduling. Instruction time from the state guidelines can include both in-person and remote learning. Anyone on the call who works in the school knows that we are required to provide 4 hours a day of instruction for the day to count. That instructional time, that 4 hours, can include both in-person and remote learning. Our social distancing requirements certainly preclude us from bringing everybody back at once. That's not going to happen. Lunch and recess restrictions make those areas pretty much unmanageable in our current cafeterias. Time must be scheduled for school arrival and dismissal. We talked about that a little bit. And then time has to be provided for our teachers to plan, collaborate, learn, and teach as they work through the many firsts that are going to be associated with this. Remember that this is all new to many of our staff members as well. We had we're thrown into the emergency situation in the spring. I think as that went along, when we surveyed our staff, one of the questions that we asked was about how they adjusted to remote learning. And by probably a 4 or 5 to 1 margin, the number one response was, it was very difficult at first, but once I got into a groove, it wasn't, I got used to it. But we did pull together some of our staff members, some of them are on this call now, at the beginning of the summer, to really focus on those staff members who did an exceptional job in remote learning and how we can use their experience to help everybody else grow as well. So that'll be part of our plan as we move forward. Here's our schedule. So this is our weekly hybrid schedule. So remember, we have students who will be in person and we have students who will be hybrid. Students who will be in person are going to be the hybrid students, and we have students who will be fully remote, or at least we have to offer that option. And we've heard from at least one person tonight that family is going to take advantage of that option, and I'm sure there will be many others. Our survey back in June, end of June, beginning of July, indicated between 22 and 25% of our families at that point wanted the option of full remote, wanted to take advantage of full remote instruction. And I think that back then, you had a very different feeling across the country than we do now. So, if you turn on the news or watch the news for a minute, you're going to know that across the country, things aren't going so well. In New Jersey, we seem to be holding our own better than others. And that's great. But across the country, I think what's happening elsewhere is going to start to sway some of our families. I'd be surprised if it didn't. So we're going to have 2 cohorts, the blue and the gold. Probably the number one question I fielded is, are families going to attend on the same day? And the answer to that is yes, we're going to do our absolute best. I am saying that because when we send out those assignments, there are going to be mistakes. We have a lot of families who have multiple last names in the same household. We know that, and we're going to account for that as much as we can. But we use something in the district, both districts, called family codes for families that share the same address. We have sorted people in every way imaginable, and I think we have them all, but I don't think we're going to catch them all. I think there's going to be somebody who surprises us and we missed one. So if you get an assignment in your family that has some of your kids going on the blue days and some of your kids going on the gold days, take a deep breath and let us know, and we will fix it. So let me just fix this tonight. When I say the blue team, let's say, is going to be A through L, that might actually be broken down a little further. That may be A through LE, and the gold team may be LI through Z, which will be a little confusing for the L people. But that is actually the midway break in the districts, and oddly, it's the midway break in both districts. So I'm going to work on that and see if we have to refine that a little more. But in general, if your last name does not begin with an L, you will be blue if you are A to L, and you will be gold if you're M to Z. M to Z is pretty solid gold right now. The L is where we might have to break it off in the middle. If you have family members in your household who have different names, different last names with different spellings, and you end up on opposite teams, we are going to address that, but I cannot tell you tonight what team they're going to be on. We're gonna move those folks around as best we can to balance our enrollments on the different days. Students from the same families, I covered that. Students who will require additional support will be scheduled for additional time. So one of the questions that came up at the beginning, I believe, was that will we be let's go crazy and say 50% of our families say we're going to do remote full time, then we will invite students into school more additional days for those students who need additional support. Students with disabilities, some of our English language learning students, some of our students who require some basic skills instruction, academic interventions. Those are going to be the first group of students that we invite for additional time to come in, because those students have the academic need for that. The expectation is that our kids will be participating, learning and participating each day. So no matter where you are, whether you're full remote, half remote, hybrid, that you're going to participate. Students will be participating each day throughout the 5-day week. Students will attend school in person on cohort days listed below, and everybody will be remote on Wednesday. So the easiest way I could show this was the in-person students, the hybrid group. The blue team's going to come Monday and Tuesday. On Wednesday, everyone will be remote. On Thursday and Friday, the gold team will attend in person. And then again, this obviously would be your remote students who are going to be remote. Monday and Tuesday, the gold team is remote. Wednesday, both teams are remote. Thursday, the blue team is remote. So that's the schedule for the hybrid group. So this is, I want my student to come back as much as they can in person. All right. This is the remote schedule. So obviously the remote schedule is going to be 5 days a week. This isn't really the critical part, because clearly everybody, if you're remote, you're going to be remote 5 days a week. There will be an expectation that students are on 5 days a week. Students who, again, require additional support will be scheduled for additional time. And these students will work remotely 5 days a week, and that is the family's choice. We are not assigning anybody to remote only. That will be your choice, and that will be one of the questions that you're going to receive next week as part of the survey. So that's the remote schedule. Now, here's what you need to pay attention to. Once a family decides to go remote, once you choose the remote option, it is not a fluid you can come and go as you please option. So if the family chooses the remote option, you are committing to the remote option at the high school, middle school, and high school level for a marking period, at least, and at the elementary level for a trimester. Those are the natural breaks in our calendars and our grading periods. So at the middle school and high school level, we are going to ask our families to, if they want to come back. So I choose remote in July, August, beginning of August, I'm going to choose remote. If you want to return in November, if you want to return as soon as possible, then between November 2nd and 4th, you're going to let us know, and we'll send out a reminder. Please contact and let us know that you want to come back. And then that return to school date will be November 16th. That is the first day at the middle school and high school of the second marking period. Same exact rationale at the end of the second marking period, January 11th to 13th. You will notify us. You've been out for a semester now. You want to come back. January 22nd is the first day of the second semester or the third marking period. And then exactly the same rationale for the March date. This, of course, assumes that this crazy schedule we're developing is going to last all year. We don't know that. Who knows when there'll be a vaccine? Maybe some miracle will happen and we'll have a vaccine in no time and everybody will be vaccinated and somehow this thing will fix itself. I don't think anybody believes that's going to happen right away, but let's cross our fingers and hope some miracle happens, in which case any of this could change. But right now, if this schedule remains intact and you choose the remote option at the middle school or high school level, those are the days that you notify us you want to come back, and those are the days that the students would come back live in person for the first time, or I should say that the week, depending on what team you're on. The preschool and the elementary, you go by trimesters. So the days there will be a little bit different. You'll notify us November 16th to 18th, we want to come back. And November 30th, which I believe is right after Thanksgiving, would be your first day back. And then March 1st through the 3rd, we would notify us if we get that far. And March 15th would be your first day back in person. So that's the remote option, and those are the times if you decide to go remote. Now, if you want to do remote and stay remote all year, that's fine. The one thing that is not in this presentation is, you know what, we come back to school. I decide I'm going to send my child back to school. We're there for a couple weeks. I don't know what's going on in the country. Things are ticking up in New Jersey. We're getting nervous. I don't want to send them anymore. You can opt to go remote whenever you want. So if you're going to go out, please let us know that you're going to keep your child home, obviously. But going in that direction is going to be very fluid. We understand this is a this is nerve wracking, and there's lots of anxiety, and people are scared. You know, so if you want to go remote, you're going to be able to do that when you need to do it, and that's not on this slide. But if you want to come back into the district, you're going to be limited to those days, and we will publish those days in our plan, and we will remind you of those days as we get closer to them.
Scott, this is Matt Craig. If a student has to quarantine for 2 weeks and is remote for those 2 weeks, would they be able to go back to school if they obviously are clear and healthy, or would they have to wait?
No, they'll be able to. They're considered in-person students, so they would just come back when they're done.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Sorry, good question. Anything else? We're good? All right. All right, here's our daily schedule. So preschool. Actually, let me start down the bottom there at elementary. Elementary, we're going to arrive between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. We have not worked out the details about this yet, but there will likely be a window in there. So let's say you're on the blue team. So you're the A to L folks. It might be A to D comes between 8:30 and 8:40. E to whatever, E to H or something comes between 8:40 and 8:50, and then the rest between 8:50 and 9 o'clock. That is really our goal, to try to just spread kids out. If you are running 5 minutes late, you're running 5 minutes late. It's not the end of the world. But the important thing, if you remember from the beginning of this, is after 9 o'clock, we're not letting anybody in. So that student's going to have to stay remote and do the remote stuff that day. Instruction will happen between 9 and 1. And dismissal, again, we don't have to do the health screenings as students leave, but we're going to dismiss between 1 and 1:15 just to help with the flow of traffic out of the building and make sure that our students can leave the building safely. Our preschool will be about 15 minutes later than that, because we will have families who drop their students off at Tatum in the morning, and they might have a preschool student at Sharp or at the church or wherever they're assigned, and we know that they need that little bit of flexibility. So that flexibility is built in there. And then our high school, we're looking for an arrival time between 7:50. High school and middle school, looking for arrival time between 7:50 and 8:15. Instruction from 8:15 to 12:30. That includes the passing time in the hallways, and that gives us our 4 hours. And then our dismissal time, again, 12:30 to 12:45. We'll dismiss students in a way so that they can safely leave the building without crowding the hallways. Full remote students will use the same time parameters as you see in those descriptions. Students will attend remotely on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. That means we'll be following that schedule, those schedules, on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, where new instruction will be presented. And then Wednesday will be the support day. So Wednesday is going to be a real catch-up. It's a catch-all day. We're going to catch students who need additional support, and really try to use that day as flexibly as possible, in an effort to make sure that as many of our kids as possible are successful. In terms of what will the instructional day look like, that is something that we are debating in the district pretty heavily. So we're going to work on it again tomorrow. And by instructional day, this is in elementary school, this is when the instructional day will happen. But if you are not in school during that time, I'm either a student whose team is remote today, or I'm a student who's remote all the time. We're working hard to figure out how to best serve all of the students as best we can, so that everybody gets the instruction and the help and the support that they need. This idea of synchronous learning sounds really flashy and fancy, but as a school district, we have a lot of concerns with taping lessons, recording lessons, all those kind of things. It's not as simple as it sounds. So I will go into that over the next couple slides. So students will arrive during the designated window. Again, the lateness piece. Students are encouraged to stay the entire school day. There will be a lot of time when your children are not in school. So we are going to ask families as best possible, and I know it's not always possible, but please schedule doctor's appointments and dentist appointments and orthodontist appointments outside of those hours. It will really make everything run much more smoothly. Again, students will attend class whether in person or remote. They're not going to need days off during this system. The new content will be supported and taught Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and Wednesday will be used for additional support. And again, this is the piece that's in development. We are working hard at this to try to, number one, meet everybody's needs as best we can, and number two, to try not to upset the apple cart if we should have to go full remote. if once we establish a routine and a process, we don't want to have to flip it all on its ear because all of a sudden there was an uptick in New Jersey and we have to go full remote. We want to try to stay with the instruction as much, stay with the system and the schedule as much as possible. So we're working really hard on that. I will get that information to you as soon as we have landed on it. In the event that school is closed, and you'll see this, the boards just approved prior to this presentation. They approved the school calendar. School calendar changes. You will see, and we will send home the school calendars are marked with gold and blue days, blue and gold days. They're marked right on the day. So on days where we don't have 5-day weeks, I can't even think of one off the top of my head, but on a day when we don't have a 5-day week because of a holiday, we will juggle the schedules, and the victim of those weeks is going to be the Wednesday full remote day. So let's say you are a blue team member and you are and school is closed for a holiday, a federal holiday, whatever, on Monday. So we will push you back so your days are are Tuesday and Wednesday, and then the gold team will come in as regular days. So we're going to try to minimize disruption by not switching the schedule all over the place, but there may be times, and you'll know it, it's right on the calendar, there will be times where if school's closed on a Monday, we're going to switch you over to Tuesday, Wednesday instead. So the victim in any of those holiday type things is going to be the Wednesday remote day. So we're going to get kids face-to-face as much as we possibly can. We're committed to that.
Scott.
Yep.
I just have a quick question. I know it's still in development, but is the thought that the teachers would show a video to kids at home and kids sitting in front of them? Is that the thought right now?
Right now, the thinking is that the mini lesson will take place. The mini lesson will be recorded, and that's going to happen with the students. That'll happen with anybody. It doesn't matter what group you're in. You're going to watch the mini lesson. The magic in teaching happens with the follow-up to that mini lesson, and that's what we're working on. How much synchronous instruction can we tolerate? And I use that word, like how much can we handle, synchronous instruction can we handle as an individual classroom teacher when I have a group of students sitting in front of me and a group of students sitting at home? If everybody was equal, every student behaved like an angel, all those things that can happen in a school, if all of those elements were removed, that would be an easy question. But all those elements aren't going to be. We're still in a real life school with real life kids. So so we have to really work carefully with how we're going to provide that follow-up. We know from research from the spring and also research from prior to the spring that in doing remote instruction with students, that the real magic is when I can break them up into small groups and work with them at their instructional level and get them the help and the support they need. So that's what we're working really, really hard on right now, is making sure that we're following the research and we're really putting our time and attention into when we can best support the kids and do so in a manner that's equitable so that nobody gets shortchanged. The students who are home shouldn't get shortchanged compared to the students who are in school. So that's what we're working on right now.
So they're all going to be watching, so all the kids will watch a video of the mini lesson, and then you're just kind of working out the best way to sort of work out those mini conferences and stuff like that.
Right. So the mini conferences, the support, those types of things. But the actual piece of the instruction that would happen if every student was back in school at the same time, our teachers will start with a mini lesson for the content at hand, and that mini lesson will likely be recorded.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Right. Yep.
Can I ask a follow-up question of that?
Sure.
So I know it's still being decided on. Will parents have an idea of what it's going to look like before they have to make the decision about whether to go back or remote?
Yep. That is my goal. Yep.
Okay, cool.
So
thanks. Yep.
So we're going to work hard at that. We're meeting tomorrow, and I don't want to walk away from that meeting without a decision. So scheduling synchronous versus asynchronous, we know that our families, as part of the surveys, have and during some of our other kind of forums, have requested additional synchronous instruction. They want, for lack of a better word, FaceTime with the teacher, whether that's a morning meeting or the actual instruction piece. So we are really striving to achieve that. we are going to tackle, we need to tackle instances where the child can't be online synchronously. So it would be really nice from our perspective if every student could be online at 9 a.m. or 9:15 or whenever we start. We know that that's not possible because at 9:15, if I am 7 and my mom's workplace lets her bring me to work with her and we're in the car at 9:15, I can't be in class while I'm in the car. So we know that that's reality. We are working hard. Again, that's part of this mess of how to figure out how to best meet all the kids' needs, because everybody's coming at this from a different angle and from sort of different, different challenges. So again, I just talked, some of our best practices are large group mini lessons, followed by smaller group work that allows some individual attention. And that's really, particularly for younger students, when our remote learning works best. And we have to, as a community, we have to shift this definition of teaching. I've had folks tell me we should record our teachers standing at the board, with their marker and the whiteboard. That's not how we teach. We haven't taught that way in years. So we have to really shift the definition of teaching, and really, we have moved very far away from lecturing, and we have to think of not in terms of teaching, but in terms of learning. And we have to actually look at systems and models that improve student learning, and not focusing on what the teacher's doing, but focusing on what the kids are doing and what they're learning. So we are working hard on that piece as well. That's all part of that, what the instructional day is going to look like. Equity, I talked about this a little bit, and I'll repeat it. Depending on how many families choose the full remote option, opt out of coming back to school full-time or in person. Members of some of our disadvantaged groups in our schools, our students with disability, our free reduced price lunch students, included in this group could be some of our homeless students, our ELL students, may get some extra in-person learning time. So that is something that we are working into our plan. And when we get the numbers back for how many families are staying remote at this point, we'll make those adjustments. I will tell you that we are really looking to kick off the school year in as pure a way as possible, which means we're probably not going to make those adjustments for the first day of school. We want to make sure that on the first day of school, we get into a groove and we figure out during the first couple of days what's going on and how these systems are going to work. And then we'll start to look at, relatively quickly, but we'll start to look at who can get some extra time, who do we need to bring back, who remote work is not working for, and who we really, we're failing to meet if they're not in person with us. So those are things that we're spending a lot of time on that. That's something we take very seriously.
Dr. Oswald, I'm sorry, it's Jen Castle. I just have a really quick question. I just need to go back a little bit.
Okay.
Sorry, just like one slide. I understand, as per one of our last meetings, that the schedule of drop-off for elementary, preschool, high school, middle school was designed in case high school kids had to be let out, or were out earlier in case they had to pick up a younger sibling.
Yes.
Reverse that. What about drop off? If a high school or middle school has to drop off before they go to school, then we have kids that are in school. And there's a question out there about, are the elementary schools kids allowed to be dropped off earlier than their designated time?
Yeah, so they will not be permitted to be dropped off earlier. As of now, at least, they won't be permitted to be dropped off earlier. We just may not have the supervision for them at that time. Give me 1 second to write that down so we can talk about it. And I will tell you that we had a debate probably a month ago about what works better, because we had talked about certainly switching that up, having the elementary kids start first and the high school kids come in second. Not only is it the child care issue could play in there, but also, quite honestly, the research that shows high school kids should start later. When we had that debate internally, our elementary principals overwhelmingly said, at least under normal circumstances, the number of students who rely on an older sibling to pick them up is far greater than the number who rely on them to drop them off. But if we have case-by-case basis, we have specific cases, we also have to commit to working through those, and we'll do that. I mean, we'll do our best. Hopefully it's not an overwhelming number, but if it is, if we find that we have a handful of kids who just need an accommodation, we'll see what we can do about it.
Scott, another question about that topic. Are you going to be encouraging parents to go with at least the younger kids for the screening in case they have to get taken home?
Yes. So if our students are coming in and they are you know, certainly at the younger elementary ages, we would like for all elementary kids, to be honest, but certainly at the younger elementary ages, to have the parent come and stay with the student during the screening process, which is not going to be long. It's not going to be, you know, it's not a, we're not performing surgery or anything. It's going to be pretty quick. But if the student does not, you know, our hope is if the student doesn't pass the screening, that they're not even at school. But we know that there are families that don't have thermometers that, you know, so if we take a temperature and the student comes up with a temperature, we're going to have to send that student back home, and it just makes it a lot smoother if the parent's still there to take that, rather than us isolate the student, which is going to make the student very uncomfortable, and then have to call and get the family, get somebody on the phone and bring them back. And I mean, that's just a whole process that we're going to try to avoid. We're going to do our best to try to avoid that. So we're going to encourage our families to stay with their kids as best we can.
Thank you.
In the morning. All right, let's see where we are. All right, we're getting close here. So some leadership and planning implementation strategies, communication will include a website, probably the worst timing in the world. This is part of our communications plan. We actually have a new website in development. The Collingswood site is done. That will go live at the end of this week, so it's going to be a little bit different. There's also a new app that goes with that that'll be very helpful. Probably by the weekend, when you log onto the Collingswood website, it's going to look very different. Oaklyn, you're about a week behind, so yours will be early to mid-August. But those things were all done and signed, sealed, and delivered before any of this stuff happened. So in hindsight, we should have delayed that, but it's in the works. We are shooting for the idea of clarity ahead of questions, so we're going to try to be as clear as possible. And then sadly, that means some of our communications may be a little lengthy because we're trying to get ahead of the questions before they come in. The administration and staff will develop and communicate clear attendance expectations, and that does not mean if your child's sick to have them come to school. That means particularly when your child is at home, what's going to count as them being in school that day. There are two things that we struggled with a lot in the spring. One of them was assessment, and one of them was assessment meaning testing, giving grades, and the other was attendance. So we have people inside the district who feel all different kinds of ways about both of those items, those areas. So we're going to work on that. That is right after we get done what the daily schedule is going to look like. That's next on the list. So we're going to tackle that within a week or so. Keeping in mind that synchronous instruction works for many, but doesn't work for all. We understand that. The district will provide a device to each student and access points as needed. So last year, devices were provided to all students grades 2 through 12. Or actually 2 through the 18 to 21 program. Our first kindergarten, preschool, and first grade students were surveyed, and any family that needed a device was provided a device. As of this year, every single student, preschool through grade 12 and beyond, will be provided with a device. We also have access points available if a family does not have internet access. We have those hotspots available to provide them with that access. Professional learning will be necessary. That's part of the calendar change. Administrators will work with teachers to solicit ongoing feedback, and we are going to have to adjust as we go. We are not going to commit to doing something that's not working. If it's not working, we're going to have to abandon it and fall back to something that will work. The administration will develop contingency plans to address staff shortages. I'll talk to that at the very end. And staff accommodations, staff working from home. We are working on Google Classroom as our daily launching pad, which means everybody will start their day, whether you're in school, home, remote, hybrid or remote, whatever. Start your day using Google Classroom. That Google Classroom may launch you to another website. So last year we used Google Classroom grades 2 through 12 in the spring. We're going to try to push that down all the way to preschool as just a starting place. There may be a link on your daily classroom that shoots you off to something else that's going to be more meaningful to an early childhood student, a young student. But we want to be consistent with, we try to be consistent with that as much as possible.
Scott.
Yep.
To assist with communication and in keeping it in light, the idea of everyone's using Google Classroom now, right. Can families be invited into teachers' Google Classrooms as guardians, not as students, so they can kind of get that weekly update, just to kind of keep everybody in the loop? I know some teachers do it, just to kind of keep everyone in the loop.
Yes. Yep, that's something we'll discuss, and we'll provide our teachers with training on how to make that happen.
Dr. Oswald, you mentioned that all students were going to have electronics. I'm speaking in regards to Oaklyn. Last year, Oaklyn's fifth graders, they have their computers. The understanding was when they got to middle school, they were trading those in for then middle school computers.
Right.
How is that going to work? Are these fifth graders who are now sixth graders just keeping their Chromebooks that they have?
No, we have ordered new Chromebooks. So our typical routine is we have classroom, typical year, we have classroom sets in our elementary schools, grades 3 on up. And then in 6th grade, the student gets a Chromebook to take home, it's theirs. And then in 9th grade, they get a refresher, they get a new one. So that is still the plan. I can tell you as of last Friday, our distributor for our Chromebooks indicated that they were not guaranteeing that they'd be available by the first day of school. We were actually hoping to get them into people's hands before the first day of school. So we still have our fingers crossed that that'll happen. But if we do not have the Chromebooks by the first day of school, then the 5th graders will keep them. Our little guys are going to use, our younger kids are going to use a different Chromebook that's more suited, the touchscreen more suited to their needs. But our upper level kids, the plan is 6th and 9th grade, just like always, will get new Chromebooks. Will they be here on day one? That's the question. If they're not, as soon as they're here, we'll get them to them, and then we will collect the old ones and get them back where they belong.
Thank you.
Yep. So roles of our staff, there's no magic in here. This is just part of the state plan. So all of our staff are going to be asked to monitor and reinforce distancing. That's got to be a kind of an all-for-one type of a responsibility. Our teachers, administrators, and paraprofessionals will focus on continuously improving during hybrid instruction. That's why we have PD built into our schedule purposefully. Our supplies, our elementary administrators are working on a common supply list across our elementary grades, and that'll go across both districts. Some of those supplies may well be provided by the districts, by the schools, but we know there are some things that our kids need, particularly for their remote days. Feedback and assessment, that's one of those 2 areas I told you that we were working on in terms of how to give feedback, how to assess students and their learning. That may look very different than it has in the past. There are ways to do that, but we're going to work with some of our really kind of our leaders in the area of remote learning for what they did in that area last year. And then teacher support. So our administrators, counselors, nurses are available to help support both our professional and paraprofessional staff throughout this. Educator roles with technology. The IT department, I think last year really rose to the challenge. They did an outstanding job under really tough circumstances. During the spring, we're going to follow much of the same process this year in terms of Chromebook breaks, somebody spills milk into it, whatever happens to it. The process last year was relatively seamless. As tools are selected, we're going to develop instruction. Our 2 groups that are working on instruction and remote learning have identified staff members who are really, really strong with each of those tools. And we're going to develop PD for the staff. And we have also talked about developing PD or some instruction, I guess, for families. So we may very well have, with different tools that we choose, we'll have some family support out there in terms of kind of videos to help the families understand the purpose of the tool, how to navigate the tool. We are also looking at tools that allow us the ease of logging in and passwords. The last thing anybody who has a 1st grader knows, the last thing you want to do is spend your day trying to get them in with their password. So things with Google single sign-on are very beneficial to us, and several of the tools that we are looking at include that as an option. Professional learning to teachers, and we'll work on some professional learning for families. And then we're going to work on some digital literacy. We're going to be able to provide our students with digital literacy one-on-one. I can tell you that across elementary and secondary levels, we are really looking at September in terms of social emotional learning and appropriate digital literacy skills. So spending a lot of time getting our students up to speed on those expectations, as well as making sure they're okay and they're ready to get into this journey this year. Policy and funding is the best section of all because it is 1 slide. CARES Act money. CARES, I couldn't tell you what CARES stands for right now, but CARES is the federal money that was sent to us a month or so ago to help offset some of the needs of this the pandemic and the changes that we have to enact on the pandemic. I can tell you, if you listen at any time to any politician on the planet, when a question is asked, they tell us to use the CARES Act money to pay for it. In our districts, I think we've spent that money now 5 or 6 times over, because there is no more CARES Act money left. By the time you get done making sure every student has technology they need, and we have the PPE and the sanitation and cleaning supplies we need, the CARES Act money is gone. On top of that, in both districts, our state school aid was reduced. So in the middle of a pandemic, both of our districts saw the reduction in school aid from the state level. So that will offset some of the additional CARES money that we received. And then we are also eligible perhaps for some FEMA money, some emergency management money. FEMA is considered a payer of last resort. You'll see the kind of the context there. If we are successful at recapturing any money from FEMA, we are likely not to see that for quite some time. That doesn't happen immediately. So that's the funding piece. You know, one of the biggest questions that you'll see at the end of this presentation is how are we going to pay for all this? And that remains a big question. So continuity of learning, this will be the end. So student growth and special populations, this piece of the state guidance, we will use at the elementary side, as I discussed earlier, units of study and Go Math pre-assessments. Those are pre-assessments that are built right into instruction. So we do that routinely. It is not a test that the teacher collects and grades. It's a test that allows, it's an assessment that allows the teacher to see where the students are and what gaps exist in their learning, so that we can hope to address them as we move forward. That'll provide us with a baseline there. Secondary level, we will use Common Lit and Imagine Math to do much the same thing. District is working on the plan to prioritize the needs of students from special populations. Those are the areas that I discussed previously. Students receiving related services, that would be speech, OT, PT, counseling, any of those related services, mostly through special education. Special services can receive those remotely or in person. That question has come up a couple times. If I choose to keep my child home for remote instruction, can they still receive their related services? And the answer is yes. They can receive the related services. IEP meetings can happen remotely. We did just about all of our IEP meetings in the spring remotely. And some of our testing, however, if we have a student who's being evaluated, some of that testing really relies on in-person assessments to be valid. So some of that testing will have to happen in person. We have protocols set up and safeguards in place, but those types of things, even if you're a full remote student, we'll have to work with you on that to see if we can get the student in for some of the testing that has to happen, and that's the child study team testing. Decisions regarding medical fragile students will be decisions that involve families, the nurse, child study team, everybody who's involved in the care of that student.
Dr. Oswald, can I ask a question about this?
Yep.
Particularly for students receiving special services. So very often the physical therapist is only there 1 day a week, occupational therapist only there 1 day a week. So if a student is attending school in person and their last name isn't the Blue Day or the Gold Day or whatever, just something to keep in mind in terms of scheduling.
Right.
That the student could receive those in person if they're choosing to attend in person.
Yep, that's something we have not discussed that. At least I have not discussed that with anybody. Perhaps Dr. Whitehouse has, but I will get an answer to that question. That's a good question.
Scott, I just had a quick question about students with IEPs who are choosing full remote option.
Yep.
If they need amendments, I guess, to their IEPs in order to assist with remote learning, is there a point person for the district, or do they go to the case manager? What's the best way to do that?
That would go through the case manager. So if a family is choosing that option and choosing the full remote option and believes they need amendments, or even if they're in the hybrid option and they believe they need amendments, then they should reach out to the case manager. If for some reason the family doesn't know the case manager, who the case manager is for whatever reason, then you can just reach out to the child study team and we can track that down for you. All right. Technology, connectivity, participation rates. So devices and hotspots, talked about that. We'll provide those. The IT department will configure those. So hopefully they are as plug and play as possible if the family gets them home. Tracking participation rates, again, that kind of goes back to attendance was one of our largest challenges in the spring. We don't have a solution for that yet. That is something that is kind of 2 steps away for us. So assessment and attendance are the next step after we decide exactly what the instructional day is going to look like. Attendance standards, decisions again are to be determined, and Google Classroom is likely the common learning platform. 3 slides here are going to cover curriculum, instruction, and assessment. We have learned from other disasters, natural disasters in the country, things like Hurricane Katrina, things like tornadoes in the middle of the country that have, really closed schools down, or in some cases even destroyed school buildings. That this idea of accelerated learning is really a model that has worked quite well. And that is, in 3rd grade, we're moving ahead with the 3rd grade curriculum. And as the teacher finds out or determines that the students in the class missed something in 2nd grade because of the situation last year, he or she will stop and fill that gap in and work with the kids on some of that learning. But our goal is to move ahead with the learning. We will also be prioritizing our learning goals. If we remain in this situation or even go full remote at some point during this school year, we know it's just reality. We are not going to cover everything. We are not going to hit all the standards that we would hit if the kids were with us in person. So we have to prioritize our learning goals, which means prioritizing the standards that we address throughout the school year. Throw on top of that some of that accelerated learning and backfilling skills may have to happen. And you're looking at the critical nature of being able to prioritize what every student walks away with from their grade level, appropriate grade level instruction. So that's something that our teams will work on and will work on throughout this school year. We will build time in for our grade level teams and our school-based teams to meet. That's again part of the importance of that day of remote learning. That day where students are remote. Those are some of the things that were going to happen in school those days. Accelerated learning, I've talked about that. Let's try to share, again, this is from some of our leaders in the remote learning realm, try to share some strategies that promote student engagement by really ensuring that our teachers collaborate and are consistent within grade levels. We believe that we can take some of the pressure off them. Not every teacher has to record every lesson. If we have a teacher who's really solid making recordings of lesson, that 2nd grade teacher's lesson can be shared with all 2nd graders. It doesn't necessarily have to be that the teacher who's doing that recording for every single lesson. We may break it up into, a couple teachers doing English language arts, a teacher doing science, a teacher doing social studies, somebody else or 2 doing math. So we'll look at how we break those things up. But the important part of that is that the teacher who's providing the support will most likely be the classroom teacher. We will design instructional strategies to be shared with staff, like what will a day look like, a student's day look like. We'll look at our instruction in terms of not only what it looks like from the teacher angle, but it often looks very different from the student angle. So we're going to look at all of our instructional decisions based upon not only the teacher angle, but also how it looks like from the student and provide a snapshot of a typical day from both of those angles. And then assessment, again, I said this a few times, of one of our challenges last spring, assessment and attendance. So we're going to work on that. That's coming up within the next couple weeks. And then along with that would be setting up some grading parameters. So that is the continuity of learning section. We are getting close to the end here. So reinforcing the importance of consistency and clarity in terms of lessons. Anybody who spent a minute in a classroom knows that you give students directions, and as soon as you're done giving the directions, 100 hands go up. And with all kinds of questions about those directions. So the importance of clarity in the directions and instructions can't be overemphasized. Again, we have some people who did a great job last spring. We're leaning on them a lot to really share their strategies and their experiences with their colleagues. And one thing that we're trying to do is develop a glossary of terms so that as a school community, in-school community, and as an out-of-school larger parent community, that we all talking the same language. If I'm talking synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid, we all need to know who I'm talking about. Probably should have done this before tonight's presentation, but we will develop kind of a glossary of terms so that we're all talking the same language, or at least doing the best we can to speak the same language, and we're not getting hung up over the language we use. So throughout the presentation, I've talked to you a little bit about I've mentioned some outstanding questions. None of these should come as surprises. Attendance. was an issue in the spring in terms of how are we taking attendance particularly when the students are remote. So we will come to some decisions about that. Assessment, how are we going to assess what the students know and are able to do? Exact structure of the day, we've talked about a lot here, and we have to keep in mind that there are legal ramifications to that. And FERPA is the federal law that guarantees families privacy about their students' education. And the idea of turning on cameras and going full-blown synchronous instruction with cameras recording every teacher's move with kids in the classroom, not particularly following the guidelines of FERPA. Tools, developing a common list of tools I mentioned that work well in a hybrid environment. In a perfect world, a lot of those tools will span K through 12. I think that we are preschool to 12. I think that we've identified some tools that work in all different grade levels. Obviously, some of those tools are going to have to be grade specific or grade span specific, and we also have to keep in mind the affordability. We can't afford to go out and buy 1,000 different things. School calendar, I think we mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting. Teachers will return on September 1st. So that's the day the teachers have been returning all along. Professional learning and preparation days have been set for September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. That's Tuesday through Friday. Question that has come up a bunch of times is about orientation, 6th grade orientation, freshman orientation, preschool, kindergarten orientation, or even orientation with your 4th grade teacher for a student who's staying full remote. We're going to work on that schedule to see if we can build some orientation time or some meet and greet time into those days. If not, it'll have to happen after those days, but a little bit later on. Certainly not something we're going to put off too long, but it may have to happen over the course of the first couple weeks of school. Students will return on Tuesday, September 8th, which is the day after Labor Day. School calendar for the remainder of the year will be adjusted. So those calendars were approved by the boards tonight, and I will get them out to you as quickly as we can. We'll post them up on the website and we'll email them home. Updated calendars will be sent to families this week. Should have read ahead. So that you'll see what the calendars look like. And again, on those calendars, you will have the blue days and the gold days are clearly marked. All right, where are we at here? All right, here's our projected timelines. July 23rd, which is past, that is when we did our Genesis rollover. Genesis is our student information system. We did our rollover of Genesis late this year because we were still graduating our seniors as of last Monday. So we had to get those seniors through graduation. We rolled over the system at the end of last week, which means as of now, all of our families, with the exception of a handful of preschool families, all of our families are in the system in their correct grades. So when we send information out, that information should go out to everybody who will be in our schools next year. Up until last week, that was not the case because our new students coming in were not in because we had not rolled into the new school year. That should be corrected. That certainly will be corrected by tomorrow. July 25th through August. July 25th was last week through August 3rd. We are doing our staff survey. This is to ask our staff members who may have conditions, medical conditions or other conditions that would prevent them from coming back to school. That's important because without our staff, this entire plan falls apart. July 27th is today. That's what we're doing right now. July 28th, I'm going to try to send out a message to families tomorrow, which is really simple. We are going to use our Genesis system to collect information about specific students in specific families from here on out. So using that system, every family is going to have to know their Genesis username and their Genesis password. At the secondary level, that's probably no big deal because our families use that to check their kids' grades pretty frequently. In Oaklyn, pretty good with that. Our Oaklyn families use that pretty regularly. In Collingswood's elementary schools, we only really use that system a couple times a year, sometimes always for updating your demographic information at the beginning of the year. And sometimes some of our schools have actually used Genesis to schedule conferences. I think Garfield started that last year, schedule conferences with families. So there's a really good shot that many of our Collingswood elementary school families have no idea what their Genesis password is. So we are going to send a message out this week, hopefully tomorrow, to those families that says, if you don't know your Genesis password, but you remember your username, hit the button that says forgot my password and take it from there. If you don't even remember your username, there will be directions on how you can go about getting that username. For our new families, you should have received an email within the last week or so, 10 days maybe, assigning you a username and a generic password that you can jump on and change. If those folks didn't get that email, or it went to spam, or whatever reason you didn't see it, those parents will also be asked to be given directions for how to get a username and password. So this week's going to be a warm up to try to get people ready to jump on next week and start answering some survey questions. My goal is by July 31st, which I think is Friday, is to share this plan with the community. It will not be in this PowerPoint form or this presentation form. It'll be a real plan. And some of the questions you asked tonight, I will do my best to address when it comes out in the real plan. Next week, August 3rd, we're going to send out our family survey that will go through Genesis. You'll log in. When you log into Genesis, you're not going to be able to do anything until you answer those survey questions. It's going to stop you in your tracks until you answer a survey for every single student in your family. So if you have one, you have to answer one survey. If you have 3 or 5 kids, you have to answer 5 surveys. And it's not going to let you get beyond that until you answer the surveys. And the questions on the surveys are going to be, do you want to go hybrid, stay hybrid, or stay full-time remote? It's going to ask I'm going to ask a question about flexibility among the cohort days. So we know that there will be families who somebody stays at home, and it doesn't really matter whether I'm on the blue team or the gold team. That's important information for us to know, because at some point we're going to get requests from the Adams family, no pun intended, that they want to have childcare. They're making childcare arrangements with the Walsh family, and the Walshes and the Adams are obviously going to be on different days. So if we are trying to accommodate everyone we can possibly accommodate, but to do that, we need to know who has some flexibility. So if you're a blue team member, but quite honestly, it doesn't matter to you whether your kids go to school Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, then we're going to ask you that question, so that we know you're going to be some of our first families to call and say, hey, would you mind moving over so that we can get the Walshes over here? And I hope that makes a little bit of sense. We're going to ask families who are possible to waive transportation. If you have transportation, for the most part, it would be in an IEP, and you're able to waive that and drop your student off at school yourself, that may open up a bus seat for another family who just can't have transportation. And then we will include those 3 Just Kids questions that I mentioned earlier: AM care, PM care, full day care. By attaching the answers to those questions to individual students, we can obviously then see which students are of our elementary schools, which students, how many students we have opting into AM care from a specific school. All right, August 7th, which I guess is the end of maybe next week. We are going to try to get out to everybody the blue team or the gold team assignments. Will be shared with our families. Earlier tonight, I gave you very broad descriptions of that in terms of A to L, or perhaps A to LE, and then M through Z. So we're going to, by August 7th, we're going to try to get into your hands the exact team that you're going to be on. And then we know the community is going to start making arrangements and having requests, or somebody in my household has a different last name than I do, and we as a district missed that, and I need this person to slide over to another day. We're going to listen to those requests, and we're going to do our absolute best to honor those requests, as much as we can. So then a week later, we're going to respond to those parent requests to let you know that we could accommodate you and we were able to shift somebody else around. And then September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, we talked about staff PD. September 8th, the kids come back. Last slide. Oh, no, actually not the last slide. Points to remember from this presentation: our COVID-19 policies, everything we are doing in our schools are intended to mitigate but not eliminate the risk. Any of these plans can change at a moment's notice. I would not write any of this in pen, because you see an uptick in New Jersey's numbers, and I think you're gonna that could throw this plan into chaos. So big questions were: how will the New Jersey COVID-19 numbers fare over the next month? How will teachers? How many of our teachers are going to be able to return to school? Those of you who are not from Collingswood but are working in perhaps as teachers or staff members in other districts know that getting substitutes last year under perfect circumstances was near impossible. Getting substitutes now, just don't see that happening. We are working at it, but people are not coming out of the woodworks to substitute in schools now. How will transportation play into our plans? And that's more of a statewide issue. I don't think that has really hit home yet in terms of the state level. And then the biggest question is, who's going to pay for all this? All of these things we talked about tonight are expensive. And that CARES money, that, and I'm not kidding when I tell you, we have spent that 3, 4, 5 times over. So who's going to pay for this in the end? I know there's another bill floating through our federal legislature right now that is supposed to bring some more money to schools. We'll see where that goes or if that ever happens. But right now, there's a big question about who's going to pay for all this. So last slide. If I were a Collingswood or Oaklyn family with children, what would I be doing right now? First and foremost, I'd be focusing on childcare, finding families. In an ideal world, you're going to find families who are in that same last name range as you. I know that is dreaming, but that's perfection. So that you can share childcare arrangements, start forming those pods with other people who can help take care of your kids. I would determine with my children which mask and face covering they can tolerate the most, the best, and getting them used to wearing that, even if that is 5 minutes today, 10 minutes tomorrow. Start getting them used to wearing those masks. Hopefully that started already. And certainly you should keep your eye on some texts, or keep your eye on your email and texts for messages coming out of the school district, as well as our district websites. Everything that we put out, we will post up on our website, whether it's the old website or the new one, where we are in that process. We will get everything out there and post it out there for you. So that is the end of this very long presentation. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen and try to answer as many questions as I can. And at the same time, if I don't have an answer, I'm going to write it down to make sure that we tackle it.
Dr. Oswald, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask for a motion to come out of committee of the whole.
Sorry, yep.
And then I'm going to throw it over to Adam from the OEF to field the questions on your behalf. So can I have a motion to come out of the committee of the whole, please?
So moved. Chris.
Thanks.
Second, Jen Castle.
Thank you. Okay, Adam from the OEF. I know you've been watching all the questions coming in.
I've collected all the questions from the chat, but I'll start with a comment first. Dr. Oswald from Meg Long. She wants to publicly acknowledge and appreciate the enormous, in all caps, amount of effort and energy and time that this planning is required. She knows there'll be a lot of changes, questions, and many families that will not have all their needs perfectly met, but a huge thanks to the full staff of the district, your educators, the board, volunteers, and all that have been working to develop these contingencies. Thank you, including all the people who are on this Zoom call. A really quick clarification question first. Cleaning supplies will be available to the middle school and high school students in the classrooms to clean?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Do you know what the average class size is in Collingswood Middle School? Someone was asking.
Typically we are around 20 to 20. I mean, we don't typically go over 24. That is, it certainly is a number this year that we'll keep a much closer eye on. But we're typically in the low 20s in most of those classes, and some are smaller.
I think you covered a lot of this already, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. Is there a plan for parents of students with IEPs to have meetings with the child study team about how services and needs will be met logistically? I think you said yes, correct?
Well, there's a plan. There's not a plan. So what I don't want people to leave expecting is that every family of a student with special needs is going to receive a call asking to redo their IEP. If you have an IEP concern, depending on which option you choose and kind of what the schedule is, then you should reach out to your case manager. That's not something that will happen by default. So if that's a concern, then you should reach out to the case manager. If you're unaware of the case manager, and our child study team members don't work all summer. I mean, they're in and out, but they're not in every day. So if you reach out and you don't hear something in a few days or a week, then certainly reach out to the office, because there is somebody in the office every day.
A question from a parent. Are you considering doing a virtual tour of the new classroom layouts and the way the day would run, drop off, etc.?
That is not something that we talked about, but we can talk about that. So you mean what the classrooms look like as they're set up?
I think it like the flow of the kids, I think they're asking.
I think if I were to show you what the classrooms look like, you're going to be a little disappointed, because they're going to look like the classrooms did last year. They're just not going to have as many kids in it. So kids will be sitting every other row, and but we don't really have space to be removing desks and taking them out of the rooms. And so some of the desks, I guess, will be facing backwards, so kids will know those are the desks they're not going to sit in. But in terms of the space itself, many of the spaces are not going to look a lot different, but we're just going to have a lot fewer kids in them.
I know you said that the assessment wasn't finalized yet, but do you think report cards will be similar to what we've been grown used to?
would not even begin to answer that yet. It's not something we've discussed.
And the teaching platforms, I know you said Google Classroom will be possibly the launch, but will grades use the same platforms? So parents are only learning how to navigate one platform, whether it be Seesaw or Zern, et cetera?
Yeah, that is certainly that's certainly a goal. It's important to understand that. So some of the feedback we got from parents was that they were a bit overwhelmed by the different, I guess I'll say, tools that we were using. Sometimes those tools are like Google Classroom is your learning management system. It really doesn't do anything but store stuff, store ideas and store assignments. When you talk about, launching into Imagine Math or IXL, or like those are the tools that are actually we're working with to teach and reinforce skills. But we are going to do our best to make sure that we take a look at what a day looks like through the eyes of a family, through the eyes of a parent. You have to understand, and it's normal. Teachers, if I use Google Classroom and somebody else uses Schoology and somebody else uses whatever other product out there, for me, I'm using one thing. But what I'm not realizing is that on the receiving end, the family has to navigate 4 things. So that's what we're trying to avoid, and we're gonna keep that on the forefront of our minds.
A question from a kindergarten parent wondering if the daily form could be sent home with the student for the parents to fill out to help the kids answer questions if they're not able to drop off their kid in person.
So repeat that, Adam. I missed that beginning of that.
So for a younger child who is coming to school and being dropped off by a family member but not the parent, so no one can stay with them, could there be a form that the parents could answer to help the children get the answers instead of standing there? A form so they can help answer the questions for the
Yes. Yeah, that process. So what we have right now is in Genesis, and that's why it's going to be important that everybody gets into Genesis and figures out, the parent portal in Genesis, pretty easy to navigate. But the hardest part is going to be logging in, making sure you're getting on, if you're not aware of your passwords and stuff. So I think what's going to be most important, Genesis has a kind of a screener built into it that we're going to try to use. So that screener will have the questions, but we are also going to send those questions home in a kind of more user-friendly, user-friendly, family-friendly format. So that parents will have those questions available to them, that they can work with the kids in the morning, or, I guess if you want to bring the sheet with them, make some copies of the sheet and then bring them with you, that's fine too.
I don't think you have an answer to this question, but people are worried about the length of time the testing will take, and whether the teachers will get COVID sick days if required to stay home separate from regular sick days, and how the substitutes will be lined up, and how long will the sub be in place. I don't think there's answers to those questions right now, but they were asked.
So I can tell you that I'm not sure what how long will the testing take? I'm not sure what that means. The assessments at the beginning?
No. The testing for
You're breaking up on me. Hold on.
COVID, if you have to get a COVID test, the results get it back. Results of the test once you get tested for COVID.
So that's out of our control. If you get tested for COVID, we're not testing at the school. So if you get tested, it's going to be how quickly whoever tests you, wherever you go, how quickly they get it back to you. I can tell you locally, I've heard stories from less than 24 hours to 13 days. So, I'm not sure how that's going to play out, and that's going to be a frustration for people who want to get their kids back to school. Unless you get lucky and get one of the less than 24-hour places. And then so the sick days, teacher sick days, there is, and we sent to the staff over the weekend. I sent to the staff over the weekend. There's an incredibly complex and convoluted process in terms of, I guess you could call them COVID days, that teachers can use, and they can be used for sick time. I'm sick, I'm quarantined, and they can also be used for my child school is not in session, or my child care center is not, let's say I have a small child who's not in school yet, wherever I take them for daycare, childcare is not in session. Teachers can use those days, some of those days for that as well. So we are working through that, and I think I have my head wrapped around it now. That could very well change tomorrow. But those are all laws that are in place now. So there's no magic in that. There's no secret in that. Those are public things. And I can To answer that question, the New Jersey has released a pretty comprehensive document that is not easy to read, but it is as comprehensive as I've seen, and I can certainly stick that up on the website if people want to look at it. But that was shared with all of our staff members over the weekend.
Did the health department give you a timeline on how quickly the notification of parents would take?
No, I have to push hard on that. We just got that. We got our first notification, our first guidelines from them yesterday, and as of this morning, those changed. So that's something. That's probably the one thing the health department is kind of taking responsibility for, and I think they're seeing it as taking something off of us. I think they're seeing it as doing a good thing. I just don't know that I'm comfortable with that, because I can't imagine that, given the size and the numbers, that they can react as quickly as we can.
Junior Honor Society and National Honor Society require volunteering. Do you have any idea if students will still be eligible for that if they can't volunteer?
I would not worry about that. Yeah, well, okay. That's the least of our worries.
Just asking the questions that are in the
chat. I know.
When you do the response to the teachers, the parents on the 21st, will they also know who their teacher will be and the list of other students?
I do not believe you will know the list of other students. I don't see any reason. Yeah, we haven't talked about the teacher assignment piece, but I don't see any reason why you would not know the teachers. But I don't do that part, so I don't want to commit somebody to something that may not happen. But I mean, I don't see a reason off my top of my head that couldn't happen. But my elementary principals will jump on me tomorrow when for saying that.
How were community members chosen for the different committees?
They were chosen by the committee members. So I have, because my committee is the steering committee, I have the first responder folks on my committee, and so first responder and emergency management folks on my committee.
There's a school day question. You said that's not an answer yet. If a high school student is remote only, can they participate in fall sports? I guess that's a middle school question too.
Yep. Yes. So the guidance that we received on Friday from the Department of Ed, I think it is in that guidance. You'll see five or six kind of points that we have to hit. Number 3, I believe it is, says that the students who are remote kind of have all the rights of everybody else. So they're considered in school. So if you're considered in school, then you can participate.
And then I think you addressed this as a FERPA issue, but I just want to ask it because it was in the chat. Has consideration been given to having a camera on the teacher in the classroom as they instruct, so the virtual students could watch along with the in-class students?
That's certainly something that has come up in discussion, that we don't have the capacity. We don't have those cameras right now, and we don't. We have serious FERPA concerns about that. Again, if every student was, if we were in teaching robots and could predict their every move, that would be a lot easier to answer. But we're not, and we have some FERPA concerns about that. I can reach out. I will certainly reach out to the solicitor about that, but I've heard from colleagues who have reached out to their solicitors, and the guidance is pretty much the same. They discourage that.
And I have one last question, which starts with a comment. The information you have provided is greatly appreciated. The amount of work and effort is so evident. Thank you. If we have questions that aren't necessarily appropriate for tonight, how can I find out who the best contact should be? AP class questions and preparedness, counseling for rising seniors as they prepare for college searches and applications, etc.
So I would say the best action there would be to reach out to me directly, and I will probably respond as quickly as I can. But I will probably respond and copy all the people who could help you. So I'm probably not going to be the person to answer all of those questions, but I can, in responding to you, I will copy the folks who are the people to answer those questions. But I can't stress enough that during the summer we have very few folks in district. So you're not going to get you may not get a response unless you get lucky. You may not get a response as quickly as you'd like because our teachers, our counselors, those folks are not in district all summer. So they come in, our counselors are in. There's somebody in the counseling office every day. And in our child study team, there are folks in throughout the week, but it's not necessarily your counselor or your case manager. But we'll get you the answers as quickly as possible.
And when the high school and middle school students are in class, do you think they'll have a 4-class schedule, an 8-class schedule, or you have an idea of what the breakout will be per class?
In a typical day,
yes.
4 classes a day. So we will run, as we did in the spring, we'll run a day 5, day 6. So Monday, by the end of Tuesday, so look at a typical week, on Monday, between Monday and Tuesday, the students will cycle through their entire schedule.
Let me just check the chat to see if any other questions popped up. Someone's going to email you. If a teacher cannot return to the classroom because they are high risk, can they teach remote only?
That is a goal that we have, but our goal and our reality are sometimes not in alignment. So we don't want to tell any of our teachers that we can't accommodate them, but reality of it is we have our first responsibility to our students in school is supervision. So a teacher who's teaching remotely can't be supervising the students. This will come up 100 times over. The availability of substitutes is non-existent. We didn't have substitutes last year, and if you don't believe me, you can call any other person in South Jersey who does this on a daily basis. We didn't have substitutes last year before a virus hit. The thought that folks are going to come in to substitute, we do have in our schools, we have some permanent subs. We've had them for a while in the middle school and high school. Last year, we actually launched having them at the elementary schools and in Oaklyn. And I think we just about were ready to board approve them as permanent subs when COVID hit. So we have our elementary folks right now who are trying to identify some permanent subs. The other thing we don't want happening is subs jumping from building to building. That's not going to do anybody any good either. So if I can identify a sub or two to be in every school, to be in a school every day, then that's our best path forward. But it's going to be a balance between teachers who can't come in because they have their own medical condition or previously existing condition, and who's going to supervise their kids. And the thought that we're going to bring a sub in to do that, we're not going to find a sub. We'll do our best, but I have to be real about that, and that's probably not going to be the case.
Can a school use a K through 12 online program like the cyber schools in Pennsylvania? Somebody's asking that question.
Can we? Can a school use that, or can a parent do that? The answer to that would be, can
the person whose name is K illuminate what they're saying here? K? Yes, through the school.
Oh, yes, through the school. So I guess that question, one of the questions that came up, I think last time we did this was, is the district going to outsource its remote learning? And the answer to that is no.
Well, my question was, Pennsylvania, New Jersey doesn't have it for free tuition, which is the K through 12 academy for remote learning and online schooling.
Right.
I was wondering if maybe the state would fund the school districts in New Jersey to do the same thing Pennsylvania is doing, which is the K through 12 online programs.
Right. So I can answer with having nothing to do with state funding. I can answer and tell you the state's not going to fund anything else.
Yeah.
They just cut our money, so they're not giving us more.
If a student has asthma or other medical conditions, can they get a waiver to wear a mask?
Muted me. I sent a thing through the email though, or the.
Sir.
Yeah.
He said that he will be looking at emails.
Yes. I don't know. I'm not sure who I'm answering. I don't know who I'm answering right now. So, if a student has a medical condition that does not allow them to wear a mask, then they just need to bring in a medical documentation for that. Yes.
Somebody asked about class teacher assignments and classmates. I believe you answered the class teacher assignment is likely on the 21st of August, but not the classmate list.
Not your classmate list, but if you go by the breakdown in the alphabet, you can probably guess. I mean, in Collingswood, I don't know, I guess it's a question from Oaklyn or Tatum, but in Collingswood, most of our classes in our schools, there's one section of each grade. So if you're Tatum, we have a couple sections, or Oaklyn, where you have a couple sections, then I guess it wouldn't just be by your last name. So we will not tell you who's in your child's class. We don't tell you that on a normal year.
There's one person, Bob Fink, who's unmuted. Did you want to ask a question, Bob, or is that just a mistake? Okay, I just want to make sure everyone gets in. I think that's the last thing, Dr. Oswald, unless somebody else. I froze. We froze. Oswald, I froze. It's my fault. I was just saying there's no more questions in the chat, so I don't think there's any more questions.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Good job.
So finally, Dr. Oswald, you can take a break. I'd like to thank everybody and call for an adjournment. Can I have a motion and a second to adjourn the joint school board meetings?
Jen Castle motions.
Todd Schaefer, second.
Thank you, everyone. Stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you.